This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
It's decision time, NASCAR fans. Who gets you the points? Who gets you the wins? Who gets you the bragging rights? Who gets you the championship? Sign up and play today at NASCAR.com/fantasy.
Live tonight for the virtual Sonoma Raceway. We think outside the oval for the one and only road course race this season with another $850 purse on the line. The best oval sim racing drivers in the world are going to have to make the most out of a unique opportunity tonight as we go racing for the 9th race of this 2019 eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series right here on RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. As always, so happy that you're with us. Myself, Evan Pasoko, alongside with Tim Terry and Randy Cheneth upstairs. Our producer, Hugo Louise, is bringing us to you. And Tim, the road course on the season, that one used to reserve to the Watkins Glen road course. Over the last couple of years, we've headed out to wine country in Sonoma, California, and that is where we back are tonight. However, a little bit of a different course layout than what we've seen in years past. I'm sure it'll be a talking point all night long.
Yeah, a little bit of a different layout than we're used to, Evan. But
the road to $100,000 speeds through the Queen City, where tonight for the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway Network, the pace car down to the safety of the pit lane, and it is going to be the Chris Gilbert Chevrolet that brings us to it. Let's go racing from Charlotte. Round number 8 is underway. Though we're going to stay green. They scattered. It was the number 24 car, a Cody Bias. You can see the Mode Motorsports entry on the replay there. Sideways contact. That was Luza down on the apron. G Fuel flip side tactics. Toyota has cracked the top 10. Not a good sign for the rest of the cars up front. The 14. Kerwin tried to go low. The 6 Novak was there, and they touched in the corner. Wrecked is the 21. The caution flag is out. And a costly incident for Ray Alfala. Going to make his season that much more difficult. The replay will show.
But we have 3-4 cars now running that third line on the outside. We're getting close to the end of this race. And that third line is starting to become more and more relevant. We're starting to see more drivers jump up to it.
Oh, car round to the yellow.
Far round and in the wall. I believe that maybe Aussie gets turned after he was having such a great night tonight.
And that's tough. He was in a very good spot. And there's runs the start finish line. It's going to be a dead photo finish that time by the lap goes to Leahy by 2/1000ths of a second. But the longer they fight side by side for the lead, it looks like Leahy's going to get the job done. It was allowing those cars sliding up, and in front was Chris Shearbird with inches to spare. Now they'll flip-flop Randy. The 53 to the inside. He can't hold it as we come one lap to go. In a single season, and finally he'll get his first in 2019. Final time at turn 4. Keegan Leahy, race winner from Charlotte. road to $100,000 tears through wine country. We're tonight with the virtual Sonoma Raceway. We say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to round 9 of the 2019 eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series. As always, so happy that you're joining us on a Tuesday night right here on RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. Alongside of myself, Evan Pasoko, I'm joined by Tim Terry, Randy Cheneth. Our director, Hugo Luis, is bringing us to you, and it is the only road course of this 2019 campaign, Tim, and it comes back onto the point that we made 3 weeks ago at Charlotte. Everybody just saw the remix to get us all caught up on an ever more critical week-by-week basis as we start to run out of races left in the regular season.
We creep closer to the end of that regular season, Evan, and when you look at Sonoma, Bobby Zelensky has owned this racetrack the last 2 years, albeit a different configuration. You look at the qualifying chart, you look at the practice times, he's still at the top of the board. Guys like Michael Conti will be strong here, Nick Ottinger will be strong. They both own wins at Watkins Glen, so those two will be ones to watch. And we saw Ray Alfala back in that remix having a hard race at Charlotte. He's got spin on the car this week. His car number matches his points position right now. He's got to get moving when it comes to the standings, and he's not alone. There's a few others on the outside of that top 20 cutoff that need to get rolling.
That's not a position he wants to be in, Randy. We take a look at the standings after 8 of 18 races. Everybody above that blue cut line on the left-hand side of your screen is in at the moment to these 2019 playoffs. Very tight at the bottom. Jake Nichols was the lowest ranked driver in the power rankings to be picked in the draft earlier this season. He's got a 4-point advantage over Nick Ottinger. So that is our primary focus, watching the drivers on the left. You want to be the top 8 if you're going to have a hope to fight for a championship here in just a couple of months. On the right-hand side, and to the point that Tim just made, there's another cut line, and that red cut line is critical because if you can stay above it, you are automatically qualified into this series for next season. The drivers 21st on back are not, and of course there's a lot of big names, but most importantly, Ray Alfala, 3-time champion there, 128 points off the top spot. That puts him 40 back of the cut line.
Thing to keep in mind, though, is exactly how tight these point situations are underneath those cutoff lines. You look 9th through 12th there, as we have on the graphic, only 17 points in those 4 cars. So for Ottinger, Davies, Linsky, and Clampett, still very, very close. And you look at the likes of Busa and Guest at the top of the right-hand side as well. They're not exactly far off that mark either. And then same with that second cut line as well. Alfala only 5 points back. Both Phil Diaz and Ryan Lowe currently tied, only 14 points back. Michael Gariglia 20 points back. Things still tight there as well. But you mentioned that 20 car of Jake Nichols. He, I think, has really been the story of the championship, really a dark horse coming into this season. I remember when we did the draft, Evan, you and I, you were a bit questionable of why Gibbs ended up picking up that number 20 car, but he's currently outperforming his teammate, who the past 2 seasons has been a championship favorite, and that 20 car has been very, very consistent and has been putting in a good run thus far.
And it has certainly paid off so far for them. Nichols going to have a special throwback paint scheme on his number 20 JGR Toyota. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about him as this night goes on. Tim, as practice runs down, something else we're going to keep in mind is, of course, we had seen Watkins Glen be the road course on this calendar for so long. Sonoma taking over, but it is a little bit of a different look at this Sonoma Raceway because we are no longer taking the NASCAR Cup circuit, which was introduced to the Cup Series after they used to run the full circuit back in '98. We are back on the full circuit, which certainly changes things up.
Indeed it does, but still those drivers with the road course prowess are still going to be near the front of the field. We saw some of those names in the practice session work their way up towards the top of the board, and as these drivers begin to grid, I'm sure we're going to see them rise to the top. We're going to mention pit strategy throughout the evening as well, Evan. 55-lap race. It's going to be a very tight fuel window when we go racing here, so keep that in mind as we work through tonight.
55 laps that'll be uninterrupted. There are no caution flags over the course of tonight's race. Let's go trackside, though, introduce you to our RaceSpot TV starting grid. And no surprise, it is the driver that is 2 for 2 all-time in this series at Sonoma. Bobby Zelensky is on to pole position. 1.5 seconds plus better than anybody else. A 1:27.5 will be the marker for the 18. He will bring us to the green flag tonight. Ahead of that 62, you see the G2 Esports car right there. That's Keegan Leahy, who will be on the outside of the front row in second. Michael Conti starting tonight in third position. He'll be joined by the 66, the RLT at 4th spot. Just behind them, the 47, Nick Ottinger rounds out your top 5.
Garrett Lowe enters 4th in the point standings. He'll start in 6th this evening. Brad Davies will start in 7th. Christian Chalner, watch for him to be strong this evening from 8th. Logan Clampton in 9th, and Jimmy Mullis completes your top 10.
Ray Alfala in that 21 car will start in the 11th. Good spot for him. We know Ray can be good on the road course. Can he deliver? Zach Novak in 12th. Corey Vincent in 13th. Casey Kerwin will have our onboard candidate, rolls off in 14th. And Phil Diaz will round out your top 15.
Continuing on through, you got Blake Reynolds starting in 16th position. Benjamin Nelson, Matt Busa make up the next duo in 17th and 18th. And back on row 10, it is Ryan Lewis in 19th position with Nick Shelton rounding through your top 20.
Your next row, going to see Ashton Crowder and Casey Tucker, Jake Nichols, and Cody Bias. Your next row to 24th, and Michael Guest rounds out your top 25.
Chris Overland will start in 26th with Dylan Duvall in 27th. Michael Gariglia at 28th. Brian Schoenberg 29th. And Kane Cook will round out the top 30 as the field goes rolling down the carousel on the observation lap.
And this is, of course, that new part of the circuit that we have yet to see be a part of these Tuesday night races. Continuing on through, Adam Benefield, Chris Scherber, Nathan Lyon, Ryan Lowe, Timmy Hill, your top 35. And to put a bow tie on it, it's Taylor Hurst, Eric Smith, Logan Kress, and Brandon Cattell. Through 39th position is the look top to bottom at your Race Spot TV starting grid. They come back up outside of that inside part of the racetrack. That's turn 7 down there at the end of the drag strip. They'll now come down into what is 7, 8, 9, the S's. Down, of course, to the very end of the racetrack, where you will see turns 11 and 12, maybe one of the better passing opportunities tonight, Tim. But again, this race, 55 laps in length. We're going 2.53 miles every time around, but no yellows. So that strategy could be the most decided factor if anyone is going to be able to pull something out of the bag and have a shot at racing against the 18 car.
Yeah, you're going to try to get to lap 28 on this one. And you talk about this braking section up here in turn 11. They're going to pile the brakes on. You're going to see some action down here when we go green, especially late in the race where drivers try to make up the time as the pace car pulls in.
Pulls off to the left-hand side. The field is in the hands of the number 18 machine, Bobby Zelensky, looking to keep his streak of perfect races alive. He's looking for his 3rd win at Sonoma as we go green for 2019 round 9 from Sonoma. And it is a good jump for your pole sitter. They're going to go up the hill for the first time through 1 and 2.
Good clean start for everyone as they work their way through, and Bobby Zielinski's going to get a gift as Michael Conti's going to work the outside of Keegan Leahy here up through these quick uphill S's. So difficult. King Conti's going to lose this spot, but Keegan is wide at the top of the hill on the brakes as they go into the infield section for the first time, and Bobby's already clear. He's working out nearly to a 2-second lead.
And that's where they would typically drive it down to the far end of the racetrack to the short chute. Instead, we dive back down inside of the carousel. The 62 Leahy was able to recover, but after getting out and into the grass, it gave Conti back that number 2 position. So single filing things out up to the front. The 28 car has gone around early in this one, and the 21 machine now as well. Ray Alfalo with some issues. He also looped it around in that brand new Ford Mustang for the Wood Brothers Racing team. You'll see those Mustangs on track tonight, making their 2019 debut.
Yeah, the Wood brothers not having a good first lap. You saw the 28 of Garrett Lowe off the top of the hill in the first couple of corners go off the racetrack. Chris Overland, I believe, got a little piece of that. And then Ray Alfala also had an off in this race. And you can see the back bumper of that race car. You can see a little damage to the front, but the back bumper a little caved in on both sides of that number 21 as he battles with Eric Smith and the number 19 as they come down towards corner number 11. So everybody's tucked up tight together. First couple laps as Ray Alfala is going to come down pit road and take the opportunity to maybe get some of this damage repaired.
Yeah, so a quick move for Alfala to come down to the pit lane. You can see the back end damage on his spin dot app Ford. So he has to relinquish what was an 11th place spot on the grid. Not good, as we looked at in the points for the driver that came into tonight, not only already out of the playoffs, but below the cut line to just stay in this series. Picking up the action with the number 79 car in this battle. That's Nick Shelton in 15th spot. He's in a big single file train. You'll go on board with him as we dive down to the inside of the racetrack, and it is at this point where there's really no curbs to help these drivers. This is a really loose left-hander as some of the cars wash wide contact as the 20 Nichols got into the back of Shelton there. He's still out of control, and Shelton's off and into the grass.
Out into the dirt is that number 79 car. He's going to have to rejoin and be careful with the train of cars that's cycling through here at the end of the drag strip. Everyone going to single file out pretty much besides that, but that's one of the things about going downhill there. One slight little contact can really upset the car exiting the carousel, and there's a bit of a bump as you drop back onto the drag strip, and it can be really difficult to hold that car when you're loose, and sort of cross that bump can really upset the car, and I think that's what we just saw from the 79.
You can see them snake through the S's there on board with Corey Vincent, who was in the number 8 position. You look off to the back there, and it'll be a completed pass as they come now to the left-hander turn 12, able to get around the 6 of Zach Novak. So Novak actually doesn't lose anything. He stays in the same spot, but it was the 27 able to pass him. Kerwin behind them gives us a good look at this exchange. One of the Clint Boyer Racing entries, and here's an onboard shot. We talk about how these are the best drivers in the world when it comes to sim racing on ovals. Well, they have to get a little bit out of the box tonight, and it's a good opportunity as we get that live shot of him, Tim, using that 6-speed shifter, the H pattern, using the right hand, obviously, to get up and through the gears, and very critical to navigate this tricky racetrack.
And focus as well. You can see that in his eyes as he's looking in front of him, seeing Zach Novak and Corey Vincent going at it, and trying to pick up those positions and maintain where he is right now. Got a little bit of a gap back to the next driver in line, which would be the 75 of Phil Diaz, as Diaz closes in on the braking zone here. But you look at this, we mentioned no cautions at the start of the race. It's 55 laps. You have to maintain focus for every single moment around this racetrack, because if you lose focus, you have an off, you're going to fall back a few positions, and you're going to fall back time to the leader. And we know how good these drivers are up in front, especially guys like Bobby Zelensky and Michael Conti in your top 2 spots. They know how to get it done around this racetrack. You can't afford to lose any time to these guys.
A small mistake costs you a couple of tenths of a second, and it's very unlikely that you're going to get those back. And the problem is that most racetracks, Randy, if you have a really bad lap, you mess up both ends of the racetrack, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, then you lose a little bit of time, and that's it. But there's so many opportunities for those great drivers on these road courses, the Zelenskys, the Contis, the Leahys, who are already starting to stretch themselves out. There's so many places that they could make up speed where everybody else is just hoping to not lose speed. That really stretches the field apart in this race, more so than I think that we'll see in any other this year.
I think you're absolutely right. This is easily the most technical road course on the calendar, as Keegan Leahy has a nice little slide up and over the hill, dropping into the carousel, well held by the GTU Esports car. But this track is one of the most technical in the United States. It's very difficult to pass here, not a lot of great passing opportunities. And as you saw on board when we did that on board with Casey Kerwin, you're not grabbing fourth gear a lot here. So there's not a lot of times you're getting up to high speed. So because of that, you're going to have to muscle your way to make passes here. And on top of that, this place is difficult on tires. We're probably expecting somewhere on the realm of a 3 to 4 second drop off for these guys once we expect to see them start coming down on towards pit road. So expect the undercut pit strategy, and expect the guys who are really experienced on the road courses to work their tires a little bit easier and probably save them so they last a little bit longer going into the run. As Keegan already struggling with that, he pushes wide to the hairpin, and Andra might have an opportunity to pick up a spot up the hill into 1.
We'll see if the 47 is able to close the gap now as we take lap 5. And most circumstances is actually seeing another car coming off of the pit lane. That was Jarl Tien, who joins the group of 5 cars down a lap. He, Lowe, Alfala, Busa, Schoenberg already off of the lead lap in this race. 5 laps in, Tim, normally way too early to talk about strategy, but you mentioned the magic number 28. If you can go that far on fuel, you could make this a one-stopper. Certainly makes it that much more difficult for anybody to undercut unless somebody decides that 2 stops would be the strategy. And of course, time will tell if anybody wants to play that game.
I saw Michael Conti on Twitter earlier this week talking to his followers, and he mentioned to one of them about lap 28 being that window. If you can make it there, you might have to light foot it a little bit, pedal it a little bit, and make it to that point in order to make it a one-stop race. So we might see some strategy out of these guys, Evan, to try to make it a two-stop race if it is quicker. I know Randy's more of a road course guy than we are, and I know he's probably been crunching these numbers this week, but you look at some of these drivers, they know better than what we do, and obviously there's no cautions to put into effect either, like we would have at an oval. So the guesswork is kind of taken out of it to that point, but we'll see what transpires here throughout this one, as we still have some close battles throughout this racetrack, including that number 2 of Kane Cook.
Yeah, we're watching that battle now. It's for 19th, 20th, and 21st. They're trying to chase down the 17 to Michael Guest, 20-some-odd seconds off of the race leader. And, good amount of space, 4 or 5 car lengths between all these cars as we look off of the back end, and he heads down to the hairpin turn 11. Certainly drivers close, but not all on top of each other, and they'll continue to get more space as the night goes on. And to continue that point about the strategy, typically you come into a race with the idea of what you want your strategy to be, Randy, and then you go from there. And the caution flags will dictate it. You modify from that point. Not the case tonight again, because there aren't any. So it's your game to run, and especially at a racetrack like this where it's more so you versus the track as opposed to you versus the other cars around you. Still early on for the restart, so these tight groups will happen. But as we get deeper into the run, drivers get to more so focus on themselves, their own braking points, and just kind of trying to do as best the lap they can, lap by lap by lap, and kind of break things down like that in their head, that you do have to have a more realistic or a better idea of what you're going to get out of this race. And listen, there's a lot of drivers that will admit, listen, I'm not that great at road courses. This series is overwhelmingly oval based. We do have that little bit of a curveball cut out later this season, our first trip to the Roval, which is of course a mix at Charlotte Motor Speedway of the 1.5 mile intermediate oval and the infield road course, which will be fun to see. So there are some drivers that are just coming into this looking to limit damage, to not lose a lot. There's other drivers who are coming in this one to win, but I think everybody has a really realistic idea of what their objective is tonight.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's going to be one of the big things, is coming into this race with realistic expectations. If you're one of those fast guys, yeah, you're going to go out there and you're going to have a great race this week in all likelihood. If you can, as long as you can be safe and get it to the end and make up a great points day. We're seeing that already from the head of the field as we look at Zach Novak and Casey Kerwin, pair of Mustangs working their way up and over the hill through the early phases of the early sectors here. Now uphill once again, quick left-hander, and at the top of the hill, this blind right-hander is so mightily difficult, especially in these cars, as much horsepower and little grip as they have. You're going to come in with a bit of a plan and a bit of a mindset, be that, like you said, minimize damage or potentially make gains. The two most likely to make gains, I think we see running 1 and 2. That's Bobby and Michael Conti as we ride on board with Casey. Bobby, of course, in another of the iRacing World Championships, running the Porsches with VRS Toyota Synsport. You see the VRS logo emblazoned on the hood and the quarter panels of that car, so no surprise that he's out in front. But Michael Conti is sort of a bit of an unknown, I think, to a lot of people, especially to a lot of fans in his road racing prowess. Michael is one of the best road racers in this series. We've seen him be prominent. We, of course, had the fantastic finish with him and PJ at Watkins Glen in 2016, so it's not a surprise to see him running second as well. Strategy talk, I want to take a look at lap times. Bobby Zalenski, every single lap has gotten slower and slower. 27.5 lap 2, 28.1 to 28.9. They're losing nearly a half second per lap around this place on tires.
And somebody who lost a lot more than that the last lap was Ryan Michael Luza. He got pushed wide. It looked like it was going down and into the carousel. You can see the front end damage on that flip side Tactics Toyota. He just went wide, ended up in the grass or the dirt, if you will, and drove straight into the end of a tire wall, sent that car around. He was able to get it back going, but the front end damage really tells the tale of the tape. He started this race in 19th position, and that time by the start finish line, he was scored in 26th. Here's the replay. Just got way out wide, couldn't turn it right there into the end of the tire wall, Tim, and that is technically grass. If it's early spring, it actually looks like it. Of course, by the time NASCAR rolls around in the summer, and by the time that this race comes around as well, and when the scan was, it's more so like a dirt or a dust out there. There's just no grip, and the onboard shows you he had it all the way to the left, and once he got out there, he was really just along for the ride.
And we mentioned drivers that can or can't afford a mulligan or a bad race here in this series. But you look at Ryan Luza, when it comes to points, he's ahead of the series, and he's almost ahead of the series by a full race. So you don't want to have a bad race because you still have a few races before that regular season cutoff. But if anybody can afford to lose a couple of positions in a race, Ryan Luza has that little bit of a cushion built coming into this evening. But as you see right now, he's battling with Eric Smith on your screen, trying to get a couple of those positions back that he lost on that off, but got a little ways to go. That's around the 25th place battle right now, and it's about 35 or 36 seconds behind the battle up in front with Bobby Zielinski ahead by almost 4 seconds now over Mike Conti.
We'll get a better idea when he completes the lap time here. His lap times prior to that incident, a 1:31, a 1:30, and a 1:32. Of course, his last lap was very slow because, again, they get that car turned back around. So we'll see if the damage is really going to hinder the 53. Lap time, that time a 1:31. So it doesn't appear like it's hurting him that much. That was his second slowest lap of the race right there. But certainly I don't think that race car is going to drive quite like it used to. And you're not really going to have an opportunity under yellows to come fix it in because there aren't any. Only pit stop should be clean in and out for tires and fuel. So we'll see what he's able to fight with. Not the end of the world. I think, again, that incident for Luza hurts less because he's your points leader than the incident with Ray Alfala did because, again, he came in 21st in the points and, well, he's currently scored in the number 38 position. And, in fact, that car has gone behind the wall, Randy. So Ray Alfala's night is done after that spin on lap 1.
And I actually think this could more or less be an end of the 21 cars season in terms of being able to scrape his way into the top 8 somehow, some way. Of course, a couple weeks back, we set the halfway mark for the regular season before we got to the playoffs. Tonight marks the halfway point of the championship as a whole. So it's pretty much, I think, a year done and dusted and a year done and over with for Ray. That he's probably going to be wanting to go out there and likely forget. As we look at the 36 car, who's wheel to wheel right now, Chris Shearburn dealing with some traffic, really in sort of the big, thicker part of the group at the moment. At the head of the field, things are strung out. Things a little bit strung out near the back as well. But very tight train of cars here from about, I think, 13th on back.
They just can't get that separation from one another. It's, about a second or so in between all of them. But some of the wider shots, you can see that they're pretty much on top of each other. The 4 car right there in front of Shearburn. He's got a Michael Guerrilla pretty close behind him. So these battles are going to continue as this race runs along. Now already 10 laps in at the 55 on the scoring pylon. Everybody's seeming to lock him up down and into that right-hander as they head back down to the inside of the racetrack. The little bit of an uphill, downhill, but then really down into that sweeping left 6. And there's another kick sideways. Guerrilla losing the back end, and the 36 and the 4 on top of each other here, the Latardi Sports entries.
Lyon almost did the same thing there. It almost kicked that thing sideways, and it closed in Shearburn a little bit more. It closed in Guerrilla, and it also closed in Chris Overland there in the 16 spin app car for the Wood brothers as well. And one of those Mustangs that we've seen on the racetrack, and great to see the Ford Mustang in this series. And Chris Overland had that little off on the first lap of this race, but he's trying to get that thing back closer to the front of the field as you ride on board with the spin. Number 16 down into what will be corner number 11 up here.
And trying to carry the torch for the team because we just talked about the issue with Alfala. He'll drive it in hard to the inside. It is a fight for 23rd. Guerrilla gives him the space, but it's not going to give him the position. He'll challenge side by side, back off. And the outer line through the hairpin keeps him in front. Great defense by Michael Guerrilla to give Overland the opportunity to make the pass. Nobody throwing the blocks this early, but also to go right back at him. And he's able to hold on to that position for the time being.
And that's one of the great things about this racetrack, especially the longer version of the hairpin that they run here with the Cup cars, is that if you get up the inside, it's not a guarantee that you got the spot done and over with because you get such a good run off onto the front straightaway and on the run up towards turns 1 and 2 that momentum can oftentimes be the difference maker. And of course, if you can hold the outside, you sort of have a nice inside line to the initial uphill left-hander. You, of course, don't for the right-hander that follows, but oftentimes grabbing that first apex is what matters. Let's see here if anything happens at the end of the drag strip. We've not seen any passes just yet. And looks like everyone's going to stay most. Actually, no, Overland's going to send it on the 3 car up inside of Michael Griglia. Let's see if he can make it stick here. It's a little bit less tight of a hairpin, but he's going to make it stick. Little contact, and that's the spot moved up from the 16.
Looked like a game of chicken there. I think Guerrilla probably could have forced it to stay there down through the S's, but I would not recommend going through this fast and twisty downhill section 2x2. So he lifts out of it. Overland maybe wanted the spot a little bit more. Guerrilla says go ahead and take it for now, and they will regroup and try to get back on each other. This battle of 6-7 cars still there, and there's a little bit of a shot. Guerrilla into the back end of the 16 of Overland, letting him know that he was there, and he's not going to be afraid to take the fight back to him should the opportunity present himself. On board now with Eric J. Smith. That's just 2 more spots back. The battle we were just watching is only a couple of car lengths up into the mirror, and well, you can see just how much he's working the wheel off of the quarter, Tim. These Cup cars, simply are not made to drive on a road course. They drive terribly, which is why these drivers are so hard on the wheels, cutting side to side. It takes a lot of courage to be able to get that right foot all the way down and onto the throttle. They just don't drive good, and that's why it is such a handful all night long.
They're big, heavy stock cars that are meant to turn left. When you try to turn them right, sometimes they don't want to go that way. And as you can see, some of these drivers are having a hard time trying to wheel them around this racetrack. The Letarte Esports drivers putting on a show here with Chris Overland, Griglia, and Eric Smith for that position. And one of the closest battles on the racetrack right now, looking through the field, Zielinski and Conti still out in front. And then about 4 seconds behind Conti sits Keegan Leahy, and Leahy's been able to keep Nick Ottinger at bay for the last few laps. Christian Chalder's been able to move up to position number 5, but he's got no pressure from behind at this point as well. So within the top 10, it seems like everybody has the spots figured out. I think the closest battle in the top 10 is the one that's on your screen right now, Corey Vincent and Casey Kerwin. This is the battle for position number 8 as they go up into 1 and 2 and try to fight this thing out. Kerwin trying to get a hold of position number 8. Corey Vincent right ahead of him.
He's all over the back bumper. We look out at the back end off of the 27 to Corey Vincent, back to Kerwin, who's right there. Phil Diaz also just off of the back end, also the Mode Motorsports entries. So this trio heads down and into turn 6, and you can see how they all try to hug that inside tight, because if you get out wide, you can end up in no man's land very quickly and use it every single inch of the racetrack, all the way over to the curbs on the right-hand side, all the way back over to the left, and you try to set yourself up for what is kind of a unique corner here. It's 2 separate corners down at the end of the drag strip, but you can't just take them like 2 separate ones. You got to take that real wide exit onto the first and cut down to the inside, and all three, I guess, of those drivers navigate it very easily. Looks like Vincent getting a lot more of the curbs, though, in the S's than those other 2.
That's what's great about that end of the racetrack as well, Evan. Anyone who's in the chat who's familiar with some of the really common road courses that we have throughout the world, and particularly in North America, there's sort of an indicative or sort of a unique element of hairpins that we have. Mosport has a very similar kind of section, of course, with Moss, with the sort of double right-hander that turns into a hairpin. And, of course, VIR had the famous oak tree. The tree, unfortunately, no longer there, but the corner's still very relevant and still oh so difficult. And it does create a bit of a unique challenge for these guys. That it is a bit of an apex swing out and then apex again while maintaining sort of a constant radius. Lap times continuing to drop off, by the way. Bobby has fallen down into the 30s, so that's a 3-second drop. I take that back. He's lost nearly a second and a half these last 2 laps. He's down into the 31s now. So I think we might be sort of looking at the point that a 2-stopper might be good and might be the way to go. And if that's the case, we're probably about 4 laps out from I think that window opening up.
Hey, you want to come down if it is going to be a 2-stopper just shy of lap 20, assuming that you are trying to make the tires last equally throughout the runs. You'll be looking for anywhere from 18 to 19 laps to run. We'll see if anybody does decide to do that. Bobby Zielinski continues to drop off time-wise. You mentioned that, but he's still pulling away from Michael Conti. Last lap, 4/10 better in his own right. Benjamin Nelson coming down to pit road. The last car on the lead lap, and well, that car had a lot of damage and looked like he was coasting it back.
Yeah, has a little bit of damage to that race car, as you can see on your screen. His teammate doing fairly well tonight so far in position number 11 for Blake Reynolds. He's had a great season thus far, and you see the 99 of Clampett on your screen, continuing to work around this racetrack here within the top 10, currently sitting in position number 6 and trying to reel down Christian Chalner in position number 5 as they go up the hill and look towards the first couple of corners on this racetrack. But Zelensky continues to lead, and looking through the last couple of races here at Sonoma that he's won, Evan, he's won both races by 4.5 seconds at the end of the race. Now, obviously, different layout here this year. Last year, he led 52 of the 55 laps. He led 29 of 55 in the first time that he's won in this race. So he knows how to get up front, lead and lead often, but also knows how to maintain and trying to manage a lead up in front. Currently, right now, that lead is 5.7 seconds over Michael Conti and the rest of this field.
When you're such on the edge at all times that Zelensky's very aware of the gap that he has back to Conti and Leahy, and maybe won't be pushing that car as much right now, which can factor into why we've seen such a drastic fall off at lap times, on top of course, just the tires are getting old. But don't take that to mean that he's taking it easy. He's going to continue to put it on him. You want to have a lot built up in reserve. You make a mistake, 5.7 seconds can be evaporated in the blink of an eye. So you want to obviously continue to be up on the wheel and pull away in case anything were to happen. It is another 10th to the good as of that last time through. And pretty soon, Keegan Leahy's going to drop to 10 plus seconds off of Zelensky. So just to rival those final interval numbers from past years, assuming that everybody stays on the same strategy, looks like it could be a very different outcome here as he's putting it to him. Conti all on his own in second spot, 5 off the race leader and 5 ahead of Leahy.
And the thing that's so impressive about Bobby is that he's able to build this lead. Is really just the first handful of laps, and the start that he had is why he has this huge margin, because the likes of Conti and Leahy and Ottinger, they really aren't losing a huge amount of time to Bobby lap on lap on lap. So the bulk of this sort of 10-second gap came, I think, in the opening handful of laps when, of course, those drivers were a little bit more nose to tail and having to fight for position. Bobby, of course, being the control car, able to have clean track. And matter of fact, last trip around the racetrack, Keegan Leahy was quicker than your race leader. So lap times continue to ebb and flow inside your top 4, top 5. As we approach sort of that window of if two stoppers are going to be a thing, we're going to expect cars down pit road soon.
We just saw Mullis down to the pit lane. That was as of last lap. He has scored in the number 7 position when he came down to pit road. So that could be an indication that the 46 car is thinking about going for the 2-stopper. Everybody else who has come down to the pit lane, mostly high 20s lapped cars, and we already have a handful of cars multiple laps down. So I think that keep an eye on Mullis. Could be one of the first drivers to decide to go with a 2-stopper. And it could also be, maybe not that they planned from the get-go for that to be the decision, but 7th place sounds good, but you're already 20-some-odd seconds off for the race leader at that point. Why not come in, try to mix it up a little bit, see if you can gain another spot or two through mixing up the strategy plays. This portion of tonight's broadcast is brought to you by PEAK Antifreeze, the official antifreeze of the 2019 eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series. 16 laps in of 55 from Sonoma. In fact, Zelensky already working down to the tail end of lap number 17 as he continues to stretch things out far into the racetrack.
We mentioned some drivers and some teams having a bad night here this evening. We touched on Ryan Luza having an off night, and that number 53, his teammate Timmy Hill has retired from the race as well. So you ride on board with Ryan Luza right now. He's 28th the last time by. Timmy Hill scored in 34th right now. Jarl Tien still on the racetrack. Ben Nelson, I believe, still limping around here as well. So potentially Timmy Hill with a 36th place finish here this evening. So this Flipside team not having the best of nights here in wine country. They might need to use that following this race. But Ryan Luza trying to soldier on to see what he can get out of this one. Looking up just ahead of him, he's trying to reel in Adam Benefield. That would be for 25th place on the scoring pylon.
Down to pit lane from a 3rd position on track. It was 2nd actually at the time. Keegan Leahy down pit road. Nick Ottinger also in the pits. The 99 of Logan Clampett. All of this crossing laps 17 to 18. So there is your group of 2-stop cars coming in at about 1/3 distance to pit road for 4 tires.
I think the two-stop window is still open. You could see a couple guys come down later, but the thing that's so smart about this is that they're going to have a huge pace advantage for a lap. Working the undercut here, we've talked about the significant time loss on the tires. Bobby Zielinski, for example, was quick lap on lap 2 at 27.558. Last trip around the racetrack, a 131.6. So you can expect those cars who just came down pit road of Leahy and Ottinger, they should be roughly 4 seconds quicker on their outlap than Bobby Zielinski is about to be right now. So Bobby's likely going to see that, and if he plans on staying on the same strategy, he'll likely respond and immediately hit pit road right here. If he doesn't, I think that indicates he's likely trying to make this on a one-stop.
When you saw the graphic there with Leahy off of the pit lane, he spent 40 seconds onto pit road. Bobby Zielinski is going to come down, so your race leader gives up the number 1 position for the time being. He is in. Conti pitting also from second spot, so those two will pit. The point I was going to make, Tim, is, well, 4 seconds per lap, but 40 seconds on pit road is a lot of laps you need to make up the time. I thought maybe that would give Zielinski the benefit of trying to stretch it out for the one-stopper, and he feels like maybe just don't even take the risk. If the guys behind you are pitting, come down as well, knowing that when on equal tires, you're the fastest car. So he's into the number 1 pit stall.
And it looks like, for the most part, everybody coming on to pit road. I think the first driver that hasn't come to pit road yet is Logan Clampett, and he hasn't come to the mouth of pit road on this lap to take that opportunity to head down to the attention of his crew. Everybody else, for the most part, in front of them coming down into pit road, and I believe Clampett going to stay out on this lap. So everybody changing around right now. You saw Michael Conti coming off pit road there. Bobby Zielinski already off of pit road. Service done on the first pit stop of the evening for the Interstate Batteries number 18. And there's the 62. And we talked about managing the undercut and managing your pit strategy. There's Michael Conti pitted a lap later. There's the 62 of Keegan Leahy pitted a lap earlier. And they find themselves on the racetrack battling for a spot.
And that's a great way to point out just how well that undercut works. It kind of gets muddled in the differing strategies, one stops or two stops, and over the course of a race you can't really tell, but point blank right there, Andy, the reason that Leahy is now in front of Conti, he pitted 1 lap before him, he got out there and got a 4-second lap faster. Well, Conti was still out there on the old tires. They're pretty even now, and I think the 8 Machine's got a good opportunity to work him over here as that filter time Chevrolet is all over the back end of that number 62, and as you look off of the back end down through the S's, we'll see if it's in the cards for Conti. Little slide there, gonna lose him a car length or two.
Conti definitely have an advantage for a few laps, but when they sort of get to that plateau point, about 5 or 6 laps into the run, they'll more or less be equal. So being on just 1 lap fresher tires is really only an advantage for a couple laps. And if Keegan can hold him off, he'll really have that second spot, I think, legitimately, and will be able to hold it. You have Nick Ottinger as well in the background lurking as well. So these guys work their way through and get ready to up the hill. The 8 car's still hounding the 62. I want to see one of these guys the next time they come down pit road. I want to see them pit really, really early, Evan, and make it sort of a stressful second pit stop for Bobby Zielinski and maybe really put him off cycle. You're not going to catch that number 18 car just by pitting a lap early. I think you need to come down 2, maybe 3, even 4 laps earlier than you initially wanted to and try to really push that advantage. Yeah, you'll have a difficult situation trying to hold off that 18 car when he eventually comes out on new tires behind you. But I think you need to, if you have any hope of winning this race, you're going to have to really undercut the 18 and maybe force him to pit earlier than he initially wants.
And you're going to be able to by modifying to this 2-stop opportunity, as there's the move to the inside. Conti got it, and is it a twofer as Ottinger tried to get to the inside of Leahy? Couldn't make it stick. It'll be 1 spot loss for the 62 as Conti takes back the number 2 spot. Ottinger stays in 4th for the time being. But Tim, if we went for the one-stop strategy and if you could get to halfway, get to lap 28, it would have been difficult to do so. You wouldn't have that leeway to pit a little bit earlier, pit a little bit later. You're going to be able to make it to the end of this race, and 8 laps from now, that's going to be well before you would think that the second stoppers would come in for their final pit stop. So you can pit very early if you want to, force a move out of the cars in front of you. 5, 6, 7 seconds, whatever the gap is amongst the top 3, that's a lot of time to make up on the racetrack, but you can get rid of half of that in the blink of an eye by coming down and short pitting just by 1 lap.
Yeah, and you look at that halfway strategy per se, be a little tight on fuel as well. So it looks like at this point the two-stop strategy the way to go. But as Randy said, if you see somebody maybe undercut this thing by a few laps, maybe force the hand of some of those drivers near the front of the field, Bobby Zelensky to come down and maybe change his strategy a little bit, it might change the complexion of this race. But as we mentioned, Michael Conti running in position number 2. You're right on board with Nick Ottinger. When Conti was able to get by, Keegan Leahy left the door open for Nick Ottinger and left the door open maybe a little bit wider than I thought he would. Gave him the opportunity to go to the inside. Ottinger couldn't complete the pass. He's going to try it again right here. Comes mighty close to getting to the 62 of Keegan Leahy, but can't make that pass work. Ottinger doing a great job right now, at least putting the pressure on Keegan Leahy to make sure that he doesn't make a mistake.
But looks like that he knows that if this thing gets green, and of course you mentioned that the tires plateau and you lose the advantage, that he may not get as good of an opportunity to pass Leahy as he has right now. So it looks like Ottinger's really up and on it. He'll drive it in hard to turn 11, get on the bumper, look to the inside, just can't get back into the gas fast enough, and Leahy stays in front for the time being. You can tell that Conti was a better car because he's already pulled away by some second or so ahead of these cars. So Michael Conti obviously better than this exchange for third and fourth, and obviously making the move was critical for him to get the job done. We'll see if Ottinger can close the deal in the JTG Doherty entry, or if he's going to be pinned back here and Leahy ends up in third place as there's another big slide from the 47 car.
Yeah, Nick definitely has his hands full right now, and I think, honestly, that 47 car, he looks bassier than the 62, and I think if you're Ottinger, you have to consider giving him a nose here, up in the run, either here in the hairpin at the end of the drag strip or potentially even at the hairpin at the end of the lap. It's one of the ways you have to get comfortable making passes around this place is getting sort of a fender on someone. He looks up the inside at the hairpin at the top of the racetrack, but not nearly enough of an open door there just yet for the 47, as he's going to just, I think, get his line checked up once again. And look at the time he's losing to the 8 car of Michael Conti out in front. I think Nick is the quicker car right now, and I think if he feels like he can potentially keep up with that 8 car, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bumper get thrown.
Probably significantly more difficult to pass on a road course like Sonoma, Tim, than it would be if you were, whatever degree of faster than the car in front of you on an oval. It's just, you finally set up to get to the inside, and the inside in one quarter is most likely the outside in the next. So just getting side by side, just getting a nose isn't going to be enough. We're at most racetracks, an oval, you get to the inside, you probably have a decent opportunity to complete the pass either off the quarter or down at the other end of the racetrack. Here you got to make a quick move or expect that car to make your life difficult, and all they have to do is by holding their position takes away that preferred line from you.
Yeah, you've got to make a quick move and be gone in order to make something happen. You see a battle on your screen with Brad Davies closing in on, I believe the driver in front of him, maybe Phil Diaz, up there, one of the Motorsports drivers, and they're going to go at it for a spot, and it's got bright down here in 1 and 2, so these drivers have to adjust to that as well, as the 31 works the outside of this battle as well. They work through and on the inside, but you can see these drivers having to work that bright spot down there. The sun has definitely come out down here in the first couple corners.
It looks like it's glaring off of that lack of grass. Like, all that dead grass is kind of a very neutral beige color, blends in with the pavement, so all of a sudden it's going to be difficult for some of these drivers to find the edge of the racetrack. There are most quarters, Randy, where you turn in, where you use the curb, and it looks like the rubber put down on the racetrack really lends a helping hand as well. But some of these corner exits, even without the glare that we're seeing, even when it was overcast just a handful of minutes ago, it's very difficult to tell where that line is. And at a racetrack like this, the same was true for Watkins Glen when we used to race there. You get even half of that tire off of the race surface and into the grass, you're going to lose control of the car just like that. So the boundary is very unforgiving here tonight.
Part of what makes someone a good road racer as well is that you sort of have to have the track memorized. In some regards, you almost have to be able to drive the track blindfolded. That's the only way you can, sort of, especially when you're dealing with a lot of these corners, being able to race in close confines. You're going to have situations, if you're nose to tail with a car and you're the car behind, you're not going to see the turning point. You just have to know where it is. A lot of the best drivers in the world, that's exactly what they can do. I can remember there was a video earlier this year with Alexander Rossi following the Long Beach Grand Prix There was a publication that had him do sort of a lap. They just handed him a steering wheel, doing an interview, and said, "Drive the laps you're doing with Long Beach," and they compared it to what his real inputs were, and they were mighty close. That's what you have to do around this place. So you can't rely entirely visually, especially, of course, maybe that windshield gets gunked up and it's difficult to see. You have to have this place memorized and know where you're putting the car at all times, even if you have your eyes closed.
And you're have been on board with the last little bit with the Junior Motorsports entry of Brad Davies. This fight between he and the 75 machine for position as they head back up down to the end of the drag strip, and the sun goes back and into the clouds, and everybody blinks and breathes a sigh of relief back down and through the S's. This race 3 laps away from being halfway home. When we get there, we'll take a look at your iRacing midway race break, possibly see if anybody is still waiting to come down to the pit lane on a one-stopper, and then, of course, open up the window for, if you want, to make what would be a final pit stop to get to the end of this race. There's plenty of battles still on track. That exchange for third that we had been following has not quite yet figured itself out. Keegan Leahy's still ahead of Nick Ottinger, and Ottinger's dropped back a couple of car lengths, so at the moment looking like the 47 was unable to get the job done.
It's about a 1 second advantage the last time by between Keegan Leahy and Nick Ottinger, who you see on your screen. I was going to make a point, and you can almost see it with Nick Ottinger, a little bit of damage to the right-hand side of that race car, a little crinkle in the hood. We kind of saw it with Brad Davies' race car. Some of these race cars look like they've been through a short track night at Bristol compared to a run at Sonoma, at least at this point in the race. So a couple of battle scars on these race cars as we work through Sonoma Raceway, but some battles on throughout this racetrack. We mentioned that battle with Brad Davies, Phil Diaz. Right in front of him was Jake Nichols, and Jake Nichols on the cut line right now when it comes to that top 8, so he's got to get going. And right now, you see him on your screen, the throwback Tony Stewart look like they're the 19. There's Casey Kerwin. Look at this battle on your screen. These guys are going at it.
At 2 sets of 2x2, and not a lot of space there. It looks like the 30 Reynolds got squeezed out of space there, so he's going to have to lift. Lowe stays in front of him in the number 28, and then it is Kerwin's 14 and Novak in this group of cars here. They'll race down to the hairpin. There's a look to the inside for the number 14 machine, and he is going to get the spot. Yes, he does. Makes the move out of 11, and he will take over in this exchange. What's P8?
But this group is not pulling any punches. We saw the 14 just before the camera got shifted over. He made a brave dive up the inside at the end of the drag strip. So Kerwin may be the pacier one of this group, but let's see how this quartet keeps themselves together. This is exactly why I'd love to see more road courses thrown onto the NASCAR schedule. I love the way these big, heavy, powerful cars run around this place. The 30 gets into the back of the 28 of Garrett Lowe, so Blake Reynolds a little deep on the brakes, and look at that, Garrett Lowe still able to get up the inside of Zach Novak. So the 6 car struggling, now up into the carousel, the 3 of them all jockeying for position, and the 30 of Reynolds able to get to the inside of the 28 of Garrett Lowe as well. Off the corner, bit of a hip check as they work down the cool down part of the drag strip, and now hard on the brakes. How are these 3 going to work this out as the 27 is now a part of this fight?
And Reynolds had the inside position. He would have went to make that move, but on that corner, forced to the outside, can't take the spot away, and a fantastic defense for Garrett Lowe in that battle for 10th and 11th position. Reynolds isn't done. You saw the contact as they headed down and into the carousel. These guys want to go after it and are certainly not pulling the punches. Simply because we're in wine country and we're on a road course doesn't mean, Tim, that these are not stock cars with big heavy fenders. There's a drive to the inside for the 27. Way down low, trying to make a move was Corey Vincent, who couldn't make it stick.
He gave it a valiant effort, though, to try to make that thing work on the 6 of Zach Novak, and it's closed in Jake Nichols. It's closed in those guys in behind, Phil Diaz, Brad Davies. We've got a battle on our hands right now for this position, and they're battling it out to get to that second pit stop right now, get that track position, and maybe pull away from your peers here and put a little bit of a margin in before you come down for that final
20
racetrack.
He got punted there. Jake Nichols is off and into the grass all on his own. It was contact with he in the 75. Phil Diaz got into the back end. The Race Spot TV replay will show it here as they go up through the right-hander. It looked like that they were just a little bit out of line. There's the contact, and Nichols is discarded of down what would normally take it to the short chute. He was able to do a good job of recovering, really only lost 2 positions, but I think the time that TRD entry gives up is going to be what costs him the most.
Yeah, that was sort of the best part of the racetrack for that to happen to him. He gets sent off air, and with that being a slower part of the track, you're sort of going to lose less time than if that happened in one of the longer, more straight aspects of this racetrack. There's not a lot of straight parts of this racetrack, to be honest. You're only flat out, I think, for maybe a couple of seconds over the course of your nearly minute-and-a-half long lap. So as the 88 car now going to take a peek at the inside of Phil Diaz in the background, Brad Davies just about able to get the pass done, but as we've seen, the outside line working out for Phil Diaz, and he'll be able to fight as they go up the hill in towards turn 1, but he's going to relinquish that spot to the 88 car. So this sort of train of cars gets calmed down just a little bit, but I have a feeling that it's probably not done and over with. They're still going to be working with the tires as hard as they can do this sort of second stretch of the second stint of their 3-stop strategies. 2-stop.
And the way that it works now, again, if you were going to go for the 1-stopper, now would be the time to come in at the cross flag point, but it looks like the majority of these cars, and of course all your front runners, 2 stops the way to go. And technically that window is now open. You could go from this point to the end as we cross the halfway point in tonight's Sonoma 55. So let's take a look at our iRacing Midway Race Break, brought to you by iRacing, the world's premier online racing game with professionally sanctioned series by the likes of NASCAR and more. At lap number 29, Bobby Zelensky is your race leader for the pole position. He occupies the 7.3 second lead over Michael Conti, who's second, and Keegan Leahy, who sits there as well in 3rd position. He is still holding off Nick Ottinger, who's picked up a spot in the number 4 position. Behind them, somebody we really haven't talked a ton about, Logan Clampett up 4, runs in the top 5 running position. Christian Challoner in the number 6 spot right now. Jimmy Mullis has scored 7th, with Casey Kerwin in 8th, Garrett Lowe 9th, and Blake Reynolds rounds out your top 10.
This is still a brawl for position number 11 on back. Zach Novak takes the position back for the time being. He was side by side for about a half lap with Corey Vincent. Phil Diaz is going to take position number 13 for the time being in this little fracas. Brad Davies right in behind him. You look down your list, Jake Nichols listed in position number 15, Ashton Crowder, Taylor Hurst, Dylan Duvall, Chris Shearburn, and Chris Overland is rebounded from that off on lap number 1 to come back up to 20th.
A good start of this race for Kane Cook. He's up 9 in 21st. Michael Griglia in 22nd, up a few spots as well. Nicholas Shelton 23rd. Nathan Lyon 24th. 25th is Eric J. Smith with Michael Guest, Casey Tucker, Cody Bias, Ryan Luza, and Brandon Hayes-Cattell rounding out your top 30.
31st position, and again a lap down, Logan DeGrasse. 2 laps back is Ryan Lowe, who's in 32nd. 3 down is 33rd for Adam Benefield. Brian Schoenberg on the pit lane and pretty much out of this one. 34th position, Jarl Tien, 35th. Everybody else officially behind the wall. That's 36 for Timmy Hill. Benjamin W. Nelson is 37th. Ray Alfala, 38th, and 39th is Matt Busa. That's a look at the bottom at your iRacing Midway Race Break. For more information on the wide variety of sim racing possibilities online, you can visit iRacing.com to sign up today and use promo code PR-eNASCAR 2019, and you can get your first 3 months as a new iRacing member for just $10. Again, more info at iRacing.com/membership. That's promo code PR-eNASCAR 2019. This portion of tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Blue Def Diesel Exhaust Fluid, certified pure #1 diesel exhaust fluid. As we start to count down to the end of this race, Bobby Zelensky shortly, but seeing 25 laps to go to turn 11.
The 47 of Nick Ottinger closing in on Keegan Leahy for position number 3 again as we get closer to that window of a second pit stop. the last lap or so, Nick Ottinger's really turned the wick up, and down here into 11, going to try to go to the outside. Probably not going to work well, but he's going to cut back down to the inside, try to make something happen here. Won't happen, but it's down to a car length now as they come back across the stripe. So keep an eye on that battle, and this battle right here continues to intensify. The 6 is Zach Novak, now playing chase to the 27 of Vincent, the 75 of Phil Diaz, Davey still in this battle. There's battles all over this racetrack, Evan, as we get closer to that final round of Green Flag Pit Stops.
The 27 Vincent just was able to make that move, so he gets past the 6 car. You're looking on for the 6, and here's another challenge. Corey Vincent to the inside line into turn 11. He hooks it up on the curb, and not only is he going to get around the 6 at Novak, but what a dive from Davies as well. At least the second time the 88 has tried to hop in on somebody else's move and go twofer. It doesn't stick, or does it on the outside? Try to stay there into turn 1, and it does. What a drive for Davies, as it looked like Novak had the defense. He stuck in it on the right-hand side, took the long way around to set him up for turn 2, and he's got the spot.
The Brad Davies does what Corey Vincent and Phil Diaz were able to do. Now, can Jake Nichols do it? Jake's had a very good run thus far, by the way, up 8 spots, where he currently resides in 15th, but that 6 car able to open up a little bit of a gap. I will say that Brad Davies Chevrolet is mighty beat up, and it's interesting to see him still putting that sort of times out there, but still needing to keep half an eye on Ottinger and Leahy as close as they are on the racetrack as they currently work off the hairpin and towards start finish. But now this group starts single filing itself out once again, but we said that a little bit ago, and they found themselves quickly grouped up once again, as we're probably sort of near that end phase of the sort of second stint on the strategy for these guys. We saw the bulk of pit stops happen around lap number 17. We're currently working lap 32, so they're 15 laps into the stint. And I think for some of these guys running second, third, fourth, I'd like to see a slightly earlier pit stop this time to try and maybe make Bobby not see it, maybe catch him off guard. I would expect one of those guys to at least try it, as long as they have the fuel to come down in the next couple laps.
But the question is maybe not, if they are going to, but when that decision comes. You do have to, weigh the risks. If you're Conti and you're 8.3 seconds back, if you're Leahy and you're 11.9 seconds back, Tim, you go for the undercut, you short pit, you do whatever the little bit of a strategy tweak it is that you feel like can give you an opportunity to win this race. But there's a risk. Are you more likely to gain 8 seconds and gain a position if you're Conti, or are you more likely to lose 3 seconds to Leahy and lose a spot? If I'm Conti, maybe I don't make that move, whereas if I'm somebody like an Ottinger who has been trying to get around Leahy repeatedly, maybe I make that move to undercut the 62 in front of me to get that spot right away. That way, I deal with the consequences later, and I get a position that I feel like I can get. They have been locked within a half a second of each other ever since they left the pit lane the last time, and it got close again that time through, wasn't able to make the move, so maybe that's somebody who feels like a short pit would be a benefit to him.
And I think you just played devil's advocate correctly there, because if you're Michael Conti and it doesn't work out and you lose a spot potentially to Keegan Leahy and Nick Ottinger, if you're Nick Ottinger, you've got 15 seconds, or the best of 15 seconds, on Logan Clampett. So if you're in that battle between Leahy and Ottinger, yes, you might lose one position to one another, but you have a potential of gaining possibly up to position number 2. Maybe in the perfect world you get up there to Zelensky, but you're probably not going to lose position number 5 unless something happens and Logan Clampett can throw a Hail Mary here in the final few laps of this race. But Logan Clampett right now comfortably in position number 5, Chalner back in 6, and then Chalner's got about 9 seconds or so on Jimmy Mullis, and then you start looking back to outside the top 10 where that battle between Corey Vincent, Phil Diaz, all those drivers were going on. Zach Novak's falling back behind Jake Nichols now. Nichols is coming back and trying to rebound after that little bit of an off earlier. With all them battling in front of him side by side, nose to tail, it's kind of given him an opportunity to reel himself back into this battle, albeit still 2 seconds back. He did gain the 1 spot on Novak.
Baby steps as they try to continue to pick things up. You see Brandon Cattell scored in 30th position. He is a lap down as you see that group of cars that we've been following for quite some time get up and around him and get on through. That's the Davies, Diaz, and Vincent crew. Reynolds just a little bit further on the horizon, stretching things out from this pack. Garrett Lowe, Casey Kerwin on top of Jimmy Mullins. In fact, that's a pretty good battle that we pick up here now for 7th and 8th spot that sees the 46 car taking the outside. It'll be a hard drive into turn 11. Casey Kerwin trying to make some noise, and he's got it with a well-executed pass.
You're going to see him reach that right hand out and run up a couple of gears here as they run down the front straightaway. I don't think he's quite going to get to 4th. No, he'll keep it in 3rd as he's going to lift off the throttle as he coasts up the hill, just clips the apex on the left. A little bit of a wiggle going into the Toyota bridge, but able to get it back underneath them, and big slide at the top of the hill at turn 2. So definitely working here is Casey. And remember, keep in mind, he just a short time ago was part of that fight with the likes of Reynolds and Vincent and Phil Diaz that we were watching a handful of laps ago. He has since moved up the racetrack nearly 10 seconds away from those guys, so that 14 car has some pace after not a great race start from him. He's done well to start rebounding, and especially from a mid-pack qualifying position, that 14 car has some impressive speed underneath it.
And it's certainly not a position you want to put yourself in, maybe under qualifying or having a rough start of the race. But certainly when you don't have the advantage of the yellows to help you out, then you're really in a tough spot where you just got to get out there onto the racetrack, fight for it, and go lap by lap, and that's exactly what he's done. Down to the pit lane, here they come. Leahy is in, the 47 of Ottinger in as well. Zelensky and Conti did not pit for the top 2 spots. You see Clampett in from P5, so Ottinger, Tim, is not going to be able to leapfrog Leahy with the short pit because they came down together, and I would assume the 47 basically saw the 62 come in, followed him. Critical pit stop for these two. Who wins the battle out?
And I guess now the question is, when do you see Zelensky or Conti come on to pit road with those two that were about 12 seconds behind your leaders? When do they come on to pit road? When do you see where that undercut works? And right now Zelensky is in a little bit of lap traffic. He's got the 6 of Novak right ahead of him right now, and just made a move on Michael Guest in the 17. So kind of sandwiched in between 2 Roush Fenway cars right now is the 18 of Bobby Zelensky, but he's working through here, and we'll see this time by if he does decide to come down.
Oh, the 62! Keegan Leahy's flipping down through the S's. The car that was scored in 3rd is on his lid, and again, there's no yellows. We're going to stay green here. He got into it with the 47 car. The replay will show right there they were a little bit out of shape. He got up and onto the curbs. Right there, the car gets hiked up, and as it's on 2 wheels, the 47 tags him and flips him up and over. Leahy had just won that race off of pit road for 3rd and 4th, and now the car's wrecked.
Such a heartbreak right there for those guys, because I think they may have had the strategy to at least reel those guys in, because they've yet to come down pit road. Actually, take that back. Michael Conti just hit the lane, so that's pretty much going to be a day killer for the 2 of them. That's a lot of damage on both cars. Keegan, of course, going up and over is going to be considerable damage, but you have to wonder about that 47 as well, having so much damage on the nose. That's where all the air and radiator inlets are located, so if he's struggling with cooling, not out of the realm of possibilities that we see a motor get popped as other cars start cycling down on towards pit road. Only one we really haven't seen for the most part is your 18 of Bobby Zelensky.
And Conti, having come in from the number 2 spot, is going to give him a short, quick advantage on speed as Zelensky continues to stay out. I even think that move by the 8 is a little bit of a short pit to stay on strategy. You'd be in at about lap number 37 or 38. I expect Zelensky to stick with his guns and come in at that point, but you're right. 47 of Ottinger is going to be working with a little bit of damage, and we've seen these cars get hiked up on the curb all night long, Tim. I guess that's what happens if someone drives into you while you're on 2 wheels.
And here comes Zelensky onto pit road, so he's going to come in a little bit earlier compared to what we might have thought. He's going to come down with Conti coming down the last lap. Zelensky going to take this opportunity to make his final stop of the evening. And when you look at I was looking at the points, you see Zelensky, you see Nick Ottinger on the other side of that top 8 cutoff. You'd have to believe that this is the pressure race for them because they are so good at road courses to make this happen. And now Nick Ottinger has that little bit of damage. He's got to really get up on the wheel now and try to conserve what he has left. And as Randy said, make sure that thing doesn't get hot, make sure all the air is getting to it, and he can try to nurse this thing home. He's got a little bit of a gap back to those drivers in behind him, so keep an eye on this JTG Doherty number 47 as we go through these final laps. Zelensky is down and away and heading up the hill.
He is able to get back out onto the racetrack, and only by allowing Conti the one-lap undercut. There's nothing cooking for the 8. He's not going to be able to get in front of him. Bobby Zelensky will remain your race leader, now prepping for an 18-lap run to the end. In the Interstate Batteries Toyota, you see Conti there just a little bit further down the racetrack. The gap between those two technically closes a little bit. I think it'll end up just shy of about 10 seconds by the time this race is done regardless. And then it is Ottinger third with the damage. Leahy still fourth. In fact, somehow not losing anything after that car got up and over and flipped. He's still occupying P4, which could be the big story here for the 62 machine. Fighting through whatever it takes to get to the end of this Sonoma 55.
Yeah, he's doing the Dale Earnhardt strategy of get out of a wrecked and flipped race car, take a look at it, and tell the tow truck crew, it'll still fire, let me drive it back to pit road. So, yeah, Keegan's still working it as hard as he can, and the thing is that this actually isn't a horrible race for this. These cars are so heavy that around a road course like Sonoma, aero really isn't that important. You don't have enough long straights to really bring your top speed down, and the corners, these cars don't carry quite enough speed through the corners for the downforce to really affect it either. It's not like, say, you're in a GT car where you're going to be going probably somewhere in the realm of 10 to 15 miles an hour quicker through the apexes of a lot of these corners and have a lot more aero on the cars as well. So for Keegan, this is sort of the only track on the schedule I think you can just about get upside down and still be able to maintain some decent pace. So it's going to be a pretty rough-looking G2 esports car, but he can maybe be able to limp it home from here, and it still has good speed. Last trip around the racetrack, still very quick for him based on his tire strategy.
Here's another battle for 8th and 9th position. Garrett Lowe being chased down. You got Casey Kerwin into the mix as well, so a handful of cars here do battle. Blake Reynolds, Brad Davies, the fight that we pick up as they head down and into turn number 11. The Team Dillon Esports car doing a pretty good job talking about how beat up everybody is. The 30 doesn't look all that bad.
Yeah, the 30 doesn't look too bad right now. We've seen some drivers around him that have a little more damage. You look at the 88 of Davies right in front, and he's got a smashed-in rear end, and looks like that thing has been spun around and put in a tire barrier a couple of times. It's been through a night at Bristol or Martinsville, maybe compared to a night at Sonoma, but nevertheless, it's still rolling around this racetrack right now as we continue to work lap number 38. Did see Nathan Lyon have a spin here about a lap ago ahead of the 62 of Keegan Leahy as he was coming around to put a lap on the 4 car, but there's another driver that's had an up and down night, currently being scored as 1 lap down back in 26th place. So a couple of drivers just trying to keep it on the blacktop right now as we work through these final few laps here at Sonoma. The 30 of Blake Reynolds, though, has had a great season, set some top 10 runs going right behind them. There's that battle with Jake Nichols, Corey Vincent, and Phil Diaz, and these guys have gone at it for most of the evening. It's like they've had magnets on them, Evan, and can't seem to shake each other.
Well, it's fun to see, that 20 car. You get a good look at it as we go on board with the Renegades entry of Corey Vincent out front. Jake Nichols in that 20 has seen a couple of different paint schemes this year. Tonight it's a Tony Stewart throwback in his Joe Gibbs Racing entry. Of course, his teammate Bobby Zelensky has been repping the Interstate Batteries colors for many times as this season has gone out. He's also sporting a Bobby Labonte throwback, so the JGR camp getting totally into it, and Jake Nichols is looking to do that car justice. One of our biggest movers, in fact, on the night. After starting in 23rd position, he picked up 12 spots to get to where he is right now at 11th. That spot is not safe because Vincent is all over the back of him, but that puts him as, I think, one of the top 5 movers in this race when it comes to plus minus.
Yeah, so things are looking absolutely great right here as Corey Vincent works all over the back of the 20 car. See him clipping a little bit of that curb right there. You can really kind of get on it. We've seen a couple cars kind of bicycle over there, and of course you have in this fight a couple other cars following in this train as well. You ride on board the 27. Phil Diaz is behind, as well as Garrett Lowe. So this quartet works their way down the drag strip once again, and maybe a little bit of a move potentially for Phil Diaz. He's going to send it down the inside. Not going to quite get close enough for the Mode Motorsports driver, but thinking about going full send here in about 15 laps to go.
Yeah, we're almost at that spot in the race. I think if it's 49, not 39, he goes for it. But Diaz just letting him know that he's there. And, he's also under pressure in his own right. If he doesn't try to make a move on Vincent, I think Garrett Lowe's going to jump on him. So it's a little bit of a pressure cooker there, these 4 cars. I think something's going to have to give before this race comes to its conclusion. But we're getting closer to the end now, as there's the move to the inside, just as I called for it. Low down on the bottom of Diaz. They'll go side by side through turn 12. It's the inside here for Diaz. He needs to complete the pass before they get to turn 2. He does it. So that takes the inside line away from Lowe, and he will complete the pass for 13th and 14th for the time being. It doesn't look like they're done yet, though, as they go back down through the hill up to turn number 3, and now off of 4. This final portion of tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Herculiner Truck Bedliner. The tough comes easy, and a well-fought exchange for 11th as Vincent finally makes the move on Nichols.
These guys are sending it in. They know they're coming down to the end of this race. They need to get every piece of real estate in every position that they can. And you look at the case of Garrett Lowe. He wants to get by Phil Diaz, yes, but if he can get by Phil Diaz, he might be able to get by Jake Nichols. And if he can get by Jake Nichols, he might be able to get up there and battle with his teammate Corey Vincent and try to pick up a couple more positions before this thing is all said and done. So we saw how hard Garrett Lowe and Phil Diaz both threw it in to corner number 11 the last time by. We'll see if they do it again right here as it gets bright once again here in this portion of the racetrack. So they're not only going to have to fight the racetrack in themselves, they're going to have to fight a little bit of the brightness as they go down into 11 here.
Yeah, just a tad, as this onboard view with Garrett Lowe is at the back of the 4-car group. The Mode Motorsports 75 of Diaz is in front of him. The JGR 20 of Jake Nichols. And then the number 88 of Brad Davies is actually well out. In fact, in front of them, there's a lap car in between that I saw, which was Ryan Lowe, not for position. So these 3 cars now doing battle up the hill through the right-hander and trying to find those track limits as it gets nice and bright. The 20 plane defense. Nichols kind of hyped him up for all the spots he picked up. Not sure if that was a commentator's curse, but he's under fire to the inside. Comes Diaz. Can't make it stick, but he's not going away.
And he got lap traffic. Ryan Lowe is just ahead of these 3 cars, and Corey Vincent's been able to get by, which is why he's opened up a gap through the carousel. The 3 of them are just going to pretty much freight train Ryan Lowe in the Charlotte Strong car, who's way off in the dirt. He's going to be able to make it stick. He wasn't quite pushing out there at full speed, so he's not going to get into the tire wall. That said, the 28 up the inside of the 75 here through this double apex right-hander should just about have that move done, but the 75 will have the momentum up top. So now down in towards the S's. Diaz, great defensive driving there from him as he chops the nose entering the S's.
And hangs on to it, well defended, knowing that if he could just stay on the outside through that corner, it would become the inside line as they headed down it into the S's. He maintains that number 13 spot on track. Garrett Lowe has to regroup, build up some speed, and see if he can get that HyperX-sponsored Renegades Ford Mustang into a position to challenge again shortly. But inside now, what's going to be 14 laps to go in this race. I don't think these drivers are pulling the kid punches anytime soon. It is time to go, and we'll see just how consequential they get and if we start to see the bumpers come into play.
Yeah, it looks like Garrett Lowe is a little bit better than Phil Diaz into the braking zones, but Phil Diaz has him beat when they come out of those braking zones. We saw it a little bit earlier in turn 11. We saw it there coming up the hill as well. It just looks like Garrett Lowe is a little bit better, a little bit more aggressive, let's say, onto the brakes, but Phil Diaz seems to have it managed out of those corners, and Jake Nichols just has enough right now to keep ahead of those 2. The battle for 12th continues on. Bobby Zelensky up in front, still 5.3 seconds ahead of Michael Conti. Nick Ottinger maintaining 3rd, and Keegan Leahy is only a second off of Nick Ottinger, considering that car has gone over a few times, and I'm actually surprised it didn't get a meatball flag at some point after that rollover, but still maintaining some decent speed, about a second or so off Nick Ottinger, and still being able to maintain about a 7-second advantage back to Logan Clampett, back in position number 5. So I'm surprised the way it's handling and the way it's going for Keegan Leahy after that rollover, but 4th place so far, trying to keep this thing underneath him for the next 12 laps or so.
And he has been, the last couple of laps. In fact, last lap, Leahy was slower than all 5 cars behind him. But to kind of go back to the conversation earlier on about Zelensky and try to build up your advantage now, so if you have a mistake later, you have a buffer. Well, certainly Keegan Leahy driving hard early in this race has built up that gap and should allow him to hang on to a P4 result, again, assuming that race car is going to be able to make it to the end of this race. Another peak at the number 30, Machida Blake Reynolds. He's in a group of cars here. Jimmy Mullis just out in front of him, pulling a few car lengths into number 46. And I think his primary concern needs to be not try to gain a spot, just to not lose one. Davies to the inside. Hooked up a lot better on the inside there through the carousel. Wasn't able to bring the speed off, but 3 car lengths. Is that close enough to make a dive to the inside? He gets right to the bumper, but doesn't make the move, at least that time.
We've not seen the hairpin at the end of the lap be the sort of crazy point for passes, but maybe this time for Brad Davies. But actually, that said, not a great run off. Although for the 30 car, not a great run through the quick left-right sector as well. But the Davies falling back all the same at the same time. So this gap ebbing and flowing constantly through the quick right-hand sort of kink here near the end of the lap. So high speed and easy to make a mistake there. And you see all those cars just brushing the left side tires off onto the dirt. They'll get it single file through the hairpin, and they're single file behind as well as 20, the 75, and the 28 pretty much all over each other. It looks like a train race as they go through there. They just need to run a figure 8 there when they come off the hairpin instead of going on to the road course.
Oh, and I think we've seen enough contact tonight that you might think it's been a figure 8 at times, with drivers slicing in and out of the corners, trying to gain position. Here's another group that continues to just beat each other up. It's the Diaz and Lowe duo. Nichols is there, but the 20 machine hasn't been quite as physical as his counterparts behind him. And actually, Corey Vincent doing a good job of separating himself from this group. These cars are 1 minute behind your race leaders, but still on the lead lap. 20 cars at the moment are still scored on the lead lap, only one of which is within 20 seconds of your race leader, and that's Michael Conti in second.
And this is the closest battle for a lead lap position that we have here in the closing laps of this one, or the closing stage of this one, is the 28 of Garrett Lowe. Once again, real good into the braking zone, a real aggressive into the braking zone. Phil Diaz, nowhere to really go in front of him. Jake Nichols is there, couldn't really get a run as Jake Nichols goes through this area and right up the racetrack, the 75, keeping right with him. We'll see what happens here into 11. Watch for that 28 to really make a move here into turn number 11. Really good in the braking zones, really aggressive. We'll see if he can make one more run here and try to make it happen on Diaz. Goes to the inside, and here he goes again to the inside. Is he going to be able to get there? He's there, but can he make the move stick?
Just so tight as they come 2 by 2 off the corner. Again, the 75 of Diaz needs to clear Lowe before they get to 1, and he does. That's the second time that Garrett Lowe's been able to get to the inside in the hairpin, but Randy unable to keep it through that very short front straightaway. If he could just stay on the right-hand side for another 5 seconds, then going up the hill, the script would flip, and it would be the 28 on the inside, and maybe he'd be able to complete the pass. Hasn't been able to do so, and there's the contact. A bump and run. Garrett Lowe, tired of trying to play nice, moves him out of the way.
Yeah, that was a pretty big move there coming in from Garrett Lowe, and yeah, that was definitely, I think, a bit dicey there. Maybe a slightly early break from Phil Diaz, but I think that's the 28 car just blatantly missing his braking point for the most part, and he sort of uses Phil Diaz to help stop him. Now he's going to have to try and reel in the 20 of Jake Nichols, who likely would have just seen and potentially even heard that in the rear view mirror, and he is not going to play nicely with the Renegade's Mustang when he eventually gets to him. So maybe picking up one spot is Garrett Lowe, but the 20 car is not going to leave that same opportunity open for Garrett if he's able to reel him in.
And this will be a good test of if that car really is better. Obviously, if Garrett Lowe intentionally was a little bit late, Tim, into the braking zone, is way off track that time was Jake Nichols in the 20, all 4 tires off and into the grass. If he feels like he was faster and he was, then he shouldn't be caught here, and Garrett Lowe should be able to stay in front of Phil Diaz. If Diaz gets back to him, it kind of proves the case. You weren't really that much faster than me, and probably shouldn't move me out of the way. So for the 28's sake, I hope he's right, because if not, the 75's not going to play nice. Gets back to him. The good news is, at least for Lowe, he's distracted trying to get around Nichols, so that'll keep his opportunity up and keep him up and on the wheel as he traces the number 20. And if I'm Nichols and I just saw him move the last car out of the way, I'm feeling a little bit nervous here on how aggressively I want to block and protect my line.
Yeah, if you're Garrett Lowe, you want to try to get by Jake Nichols and try to pull away. And
big crash!
That's in the middle of the racetrack.
Ryan Luzo was in the middle of the racetrack, and the battle we were watching, they plowed into him. Jake Nichols into it, and also involved was Garrett Lowe. We'll take a look back. Here's Luza, who has had a really rough night. Got sideways when the right side tires got on the grass and right back into traffic as he spun, hit the tire barrier, and the worst of timing has taken 2 cars outside of the top 10.
I'll tell you, that frightened me. I tend to commentate on the rear chase cam, and I didn't see that coming at all. But a big contact there for both the 20 and the 28. And talk about Phil Diaz. He gets sent pretty much for his spot, probably really frustrated. And that little moment from the 28 car getting into him is what's caused Phil Diaz the ability to miss that incident and pick up a couple spots. Unfortunate there as well for the 20 and really all the cars involved. There really wasn't much Ryan could do after losing the car. The way that wall kind of juts out isn't great, but man, oh man, the 75 car of Phil Diaz, he was probably fuming a couple moments ago, but is probably at this point now more than thoroughly entertained with the way this panned out.
And if those tires aren't there, I mean, Luza's just a little bit out of control off of the racetrack. He's fine, and he'll just spin out, but I think those tires were protecting a Marshall stand and a porta potty, and that's why that wall was there. It put him right back out into traffic, and reminiscent, Tim, to what we've seen countless times at Watkins Glen at a turn 1 with the racetrack narrowing up. A big incident. The 20 car absolutely destroyed, and what was a great night for Nichols now has that car done. He's taken the toe to pit road.
And oh, by the way, those are 3 drivers inside the top 8 when you look at trying to make the playoffs and trying to make the postseason and fight for a championship here, albeit we saw Ryan Luza have that little bit of an advantage on the field, but Jake Nichols on the cutoff line. You look at Garrett Lowe, he came in to this evening 4th place in the point standings, and keep in mind, Garrett Lowe is still on the racetrack right now. He's scored in position number 13, but he's got Zach Novak on his back bumper trying to reel him in. You see the battle on your screen now as Davies tries to get by the 30, and there's that 28 of Lowe. He's damaged. He's trying to get this thing to the end of the race, but there's Zach Novak under the braking zone trying to get that spot away from Garrett Lowe. Lowe heading off on lap number 1, fell back, started in 6th, back to position number 13. We talked about him being determined, trying to get by Jake Nichols, and now he lets that 6 car Zach Novak go wide and lets him have position number 13. So a tough night continues to get tougher. When it looked like it was going to get good for a little while, it looks like it's gone back the other way for Garrett Lowe.
We've seen a flip. We've seen a huge 3-car wreck. What a night from Sonoma. And again, no yellows on the road course, so all of this, you stay green, you got to fight through it. That is not how the new Ford Mustang is supposed to look, as Garrett Lowe limping around without a front-end clip, falling to 14th, as Zach Novak was able to complete the pass on him. Brad Davies now safely inside of the top 10 with the elimination of a handful of good cars. He's trying to close into the back of Blake Reynolds. These two have been pretty close to one another, but we haven't seen them get into that elbows-up, door-banging action that some of the other groups of race cars, top 10, top 15, have shown us. So maybe this is where the excitement in the final 10 laps will come from if the 88's got anything to say about it.
He's been reeling him in at a couple of tenths per lap, so he's definitely got the pace to get there, but will he be able to pick up the spot? Can Brad Davies? A little bit wide with Blake Reynolds on the runoff there, and I mentioned that a few laps ago. You have to be careful. You run off too wide there, it is really easy to end up spinning off the tracks right as you work towards that hairpin. Through the hairpin and towards start-finish, though, and Davies continues to rein in that number 30 car.
That's the fight for 9th and 10th position, only slightly ahead of the battle with Corey Vincent and Phil Diaz, who in the 75 tries to get home and close this one out. At once was a great battle on the racetrack, as most drivers have spread out now. 5 laps to go. The next time through, as Bobby Zalenski takes 6 more on the board this time. His group for the race lead, his advantage is 7.1 seconds, so that's what's going on up front. And of course, the intervals go across the top of your screen, so you can keep an eye on where everybody is at any given moment. But I feel like Davies has got a real opportunity here. He may be a little bit better than Reynolds. I think 5 laps is ample opportunity to get it done. Where do you set him up, though? This end of the racetrack right here, the end of the drag strip, has been a popular passing zone tonight, and of course, if you can set him up down to the far end of the racetrack here, then maybe another opportunity if you can get close enough. I think the magic number about 2-3 car lengths, and you can dive it in.
And it's going to be hard to make up 4 seconds on Jimmy Mullis in front of you if you're Brad Davies. So right now you've got 6 laps to essentially set this thing up and try to make this pass work and get it to the end of the race. So I guess you can be a little bit patient if you want to right now, but I'm going to try it down here into turn 11, trying to make up a little bit of ground on the back bumper of that Team Dillon Esports car. But right now, I don't think you're catching the driver in front of you, let's put it that way, if you're Brad Davies, if you make it past Blake Reynolds. So maybe try to pick your pass. And Corey Vincent's not too far behind back there. He's about a second or so back. So on that point, too, maybe you got to start thinking about making that move, because there's that 27 right there, not too far behind. If you have an off or you have a misstep trying to make this move on Blake Reynolds, if you're Brad Davies, you can't look too far behind you. For the most part, everybody has a position set to here, at least if you're on the lead lap. 17 are being scored in the lead lap right now. The only pass that was made in the last lap that I've seen on this scoring pylon, Evan, it was Garrett Lowe, lost 1 more to Ashton Crowder. Taylor Hurst, Dylan Duval about 5 seconds back from that 28 now.
Yeah, I think Garrett Lowe's going to be lucky to finish probably 17th or 18th position or so. I don't think he's going to be able to stay on the lead lap just with the rate that he is falling back, running 135.4 to a 131 flat for some of the faster cars. He will probably fall off of the lead lap before this one is done. Again, tough break when it comes down to it. A lot of drivers have the good nights and bad luck, and that one certainly hurt more than any others. On board again with Davies, a little bit deceptive. You see that third car ahead, that is not for position. That is a lapped car. The next car that they would want to fight with is Mullis. He's a little bit out of reach at the moment. So the other car you're seeing there, just to kind of clarify, the 31 of Logan Kress, not for position. He's a lapped car, and we'll see if they have any issues getting around him. He'll pull over to the right-hand side, the former Gilligan's Island pit road area there in the middle, and he'll get out of the way, and this battle will continue on back uphill.
Well, you say that, but we need to point the cameras not in front of the 88 of Brad Davies, but behind to see a third car, the 27 of actually Corey Vincent. He's wide in the grass at the exit of turn 2, but he has reined that gap in. He's been nearly 0.6 of a second quicker than this duo every single lap, and the 75 of Phil Diaz in the background has been bringing them in as well at a similar pace. So in the closing couple laps of this race, we might see this turn into, well, we're going to see it turn into a 3-car scrap with Corey Vincent, but the 75 of Phil Diaz, he might be able to get there as well. So things about to get really tight for the final couple spots in the top 10.
And as if you needed any more inspiration, if you're Brad Davies, get the spot now, knowing that if you don't pass Reynolds and get a buffer between you and Corey Vincent, you can actually lose a spot before this race is all said and done, as the 27 machine, assuming he can limit those mistakes, is going to be right there and catch up to them within the next 4.5 laps left in this contest. Everybody getting sideways. You saw the 30 of Reynolds stick the back end out a little bit there as he got sideways. This turn here, 10 as they get up and onto the curbs. Has often seen drivers go off. Vincent way off as he's pushing, trying to close in, and Reynolds again out of control.
Yeah, Reynolds had that thing sideways going into turn 11. It looked like he just got it a little bit too quick going in to the corner, hopped a little bit, and Brad Davies could not capitalize. He's on the back bumper. Yes, still putting some pressure on him up the hill, but wasn't able to capitalize, and possibly a little bit of a mistake into 11 by that 30 of Blake Reynolds, and it makes that number 27 get a little bit bigger in the rearview mirror if you're the 88 car. This one's going to be a battle down to the end of it. Bobby Zalenski continues to be up in front by now, 8.6 seconds over Michael Conti. He's riding that thing hopefully to the end of the race. 3 laps plus to go, and Bobby Zalenski looking good, but this battle right here continues to intensify. The 27 now pouring some pressure on Davies, and Blake Reynolds right in front of him.
The Alienware sponsored car you're on board with, it almost feels like, having watched these cars go at it the last few laps, that Vincent's been making more mistakes than anybody else. The 88 looked that time to get there, got a little bit sideways, so very impressed that even with those small mistakes and missteps, Vincent's been able to stay on him, and now all of a sudden Brad Davies is further away from the car in front of him, that he is ahead of Vincent. Now they split the difference down through the S's. They will take this time by 3 laps to go in the Sonoma 55, and a small bit of breathing room for Reynolds for the first time in a while. Look how far wide of those tires they get, and then down on the inside here, right side tires up and on the inside of the curb, hugging those tires on the inside. I mean, these drivers using every single inch of the racetrack.
Yeah, and especially right now at this phase of the race, 3 laps to go, that's exactly what you're going to want. It's going to be 2 to go in just a couple of moments, though, for your race leader, Bobby Zalenski. He's only about 10 seconds back off the back of this fight. The 75 of Phil Diaz is continuing to rein these 3 drivers in. Last trip around the racetrack, he was 4/10 quicker than the quickest one in this group. So the 75 car will just about get there, but will he have a time to make up spots? Blake Reynolds continues to defend as they work through on the run towards the carousel. This is where he's been good, and it's the reason why that 88 car has not been able to set up a pass. Can Corey Vincent maybe make something happen, though, on the 88, give himself a lap and a half to work by Blake Reynolds?
Running out of time as this race comes down to the end. A caution-free bout from Sonoma. The other positions on the lead lap all seem to be pretty much decided. This is the last handful of cars that could have a big impact on how this race comes to a conclusion. Again, it's Reynolds in 9th, Davies in 10th, Corey Vincent in 11th. From top to bottom is the running order that we watch now, and I feel like now if a move is going to come, it's going to come at a desperation. I would not at all be surprised if someone ends up in the fence. They've had so many good opportunities, unable to capitalize, that they're going to try to capitalize on kind of a mediocre opportunity late. Here's the 27, peaking low. Can he get back into the throttle? He cannot, at least yet. 2 to go for this group.
Corey Vincent trying to get by that 88 of Brad Davies, and as they battle, Blake Reynolds pulls away a little bit. Update on your leader, Bobby Zalenski. Zalenski was able to get through lap traffic. Taylor Hurst, Garrett Lowe, and Dylan Duval are all now 1 lap down, as Bobby Zalenski will come by this time and start lap number 55, white flag for the 18.
One more time around as he tries to maintain a 9-second advantage over Michael Conti. Between your leaders and the battle, of course, the likes of Ottinger, Leahy, Clampett and company, as 9th on back continues to be where we may be trying to keep a half eye, but Zalenski down and back to the far end of the racetrack now as he heads to the carousel with a half a lap left.
You can say that 75 car, Phil Diaz, is there. You can see him very close as they work at the hairpin towards the top side of the drag strip through this double right. Blake Reynolds will continue to defend. Corey Vincent has maybe burned up the tires with as hard as he was driving, because he has not been able to work the 88 car, and given the pace advantage he had, that should have been an easy pass. Big wiggle, though, for Blake Reynolds. Do the yeses. Brad Davies going to work the right-hand side. Can he make this move stick up the inside? No, he can't. So they're going to single file out. Look for Corey to get a run, though, as he had the preferred line. Hard braking zone down into the hairpin once again for the 27. He will pick this spot up. They will see the white flag as the 75 of Phil Diaz. He collects the tires, and the 18 of Bobby Zalenski, he'll be working through to take the checkers in just a moment.
Yeah, he's just shortly behind them, but here comes Bobby Zelensky for the final time, but at turn number 11, going to make it an impressive 3 for 3 on his career from the Sonoma Raceway. Final time off of the corner. Bobby Zelensky wins in 2019 at Sonoma, stays the king of the road courses in the eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series with a dominating win over Michael Conti, who crosses the line in second. And now we wait to see how the rest of these battles shape out. Reynolds still holding on to ninth. As we mentioned, Diaz wrecked that car in 11, covered to the white flag. He's still running. These three still on top of each other.
The 27 of Corey Vincent trying to hold off that 88 of Brad Davies and trying to reel in that 30 car as well as they come down here. The 30 into the braking zone, the 88 of Davies onto the back bumper of the 27. The 27 wheel hops a little bit. Corey Vincent now has to play defense instead of playing offense. He's going to have to try to reel in Blake Reynolds, but I think that was a big break for that number 30 car because Reynolds now has about a 2-car length advantage. It's the 27 going to have that one more shot, Evan, down into turn number 11 to try to make this happen. They've shaken Brad Davies from behind.
Yeah, Davies just lost too much at the end of the drag strip. It is going to be Vincent trying to chase down Reynolds, who's off and into the grass. He'll drive it in hard to the bumper. He gets there, but he can't make it stick. In an exciting battle for ninth on back, sees Reynolds hang on to that position. Vincent ends up rounding out our top 10 with Davies ending up at the back of the 3-car group in 11th position. Great action from that part of the racetrack and that group of race car drivers for the final third of this race. Ends up a total of 1 minute and 17 seconds behind Bobby Zelensky, as we mentioned. Your race winner, Randy, an incredible now 3 for 3 from Sonoma. And of course, with the big question mark of the mixed Charlotte Roval coming up later this season, Bobby Zelensky has to be going into that one as a favorite. And because that comes up in the playoffs, going to be great news for the Interstate Batteries Toyota driver as he celebrates now by the front stretch.
Yeah, Bobby's easily going to be the favorite going into the Roval. That's 100% sure. I think we'll talk about that a little bit more in the post-race, but right now, Bobby's going to celebrate this one, and this is really going to help him in the points, and I think he more than knows that as he celebrates down here in the infield.
Certainly enjoying this one. Yet another trip to victory lane for Bobby Zelensky. However, for the way that this season is played out thus far, making his trip to victory lane. First time in 2019, first win since Sonoma right here 1 year ago on June the 26th. So it is a long-awaited return to victory lane, and first time we'll talk with him down there in Winner's Circle as a member of Joe Gibbs Racing.
And as we see the results coming up on your screen, Bobby Zelensky, it comes in at a very key time, Evan, 11th in the point standings. To try to get to that cutoff, Bobby Zelensky needed this run, and we'll see him get a little bit closer to that top 8 as we work forward into that regular season ending and into the playoffs.
Big win for the driver of the 18 machine. Let's take a look top to bottom at our Race Spot TV full race results. And officially, again, Zelensky the winner by the margin of 8.6 plus seconds to Michael Conti, with Nick Ottinger, Keegan Leahy, and Logan Clampett rounding out our top 5. We will be joined at trackside by all of them in just a little bit. Christian Challenger on the outside there in the number 6 spot. Casey Kerwood finishes in 7th position. Jimmy Mullis is 8th. Blake Reynolds in 9th. And Corey Vincent rounds out your top 10.
Not where he wanted to finish, but here's a guy that was on the other end of that top 8 cutoff that needed a good run. Brad Davies in 11th, Phil Diaz in 12th, Zach Novak in 13th, Ashton Crowder 14th, and Taylor Hurst in position number 15, and 15 on back, at least 1 or more laps down. Dylan Duval, Garrett Lowe, Chris Shearburn, Chris Overland, and Nick Shelton complete your top 20.
Michael Gariglia ends up in 21st with Eric J. Smith 22nd, Michael Guest 23rd, Kane Cook in 24th with Nathan Lyon, Casey Tucker, Cody Bias, Jake Nichols. Disappointment for him the way that ended up, really no fault of his own. He was having a fantastic run. Brandon Hayes-Cantell in 29th, and Logan Kress runs out your top 30.
31st on the back, you see Ryan Lowe, Adam Benefield's 32nd position, with Ryan Luce, of course, ends up being a factor in a big wreck involving a couple of the top 10 cars. He ends up 33rd on the night. Brian Schoenberg is 34th, and the Team Dillon Esports entry of Benjamin Nelson with the DNF in 35th. Jarl Tien in 36th spot. Timmy Hill finishes 37th. Ray Alfala is 38th, and that could be the nail in the coffin that keeps him out of the 2019 playoffs. Matt Bussa, the only driver who had a worse go as well. None of those two made it past the opening lap. Bussa finishes in 39th out of 39 positions. We get set to go trackside in just a moment here, get an opportunity to chat with our drivers as soon as we can as they make their way over to eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze Series Victory Lane. But I think this Sonoma race, Tim, pretty much had what we expected. You know, the pit strategy came into play. I was surprised that we didn't see some drivers, at least critical drivers, be up inside of the top 5 to go for the stopper. Everybody was pretty much in agreement that 2-stop was the way to go, and it certainly plays out exactly that way. However, a couple of big wrecks, and they happened to some pretty consequential drivers, which will shovel up the points that much more, closing in again on that cut towards the end of the season in the top 8 to get into the playoffs.
And you know what? We kind of looked at Ray Alfala, but the other driver on the bottom of that was Matt Bussa. And Matt is on the other end of that top 8 cutoff, and he's kind of floating in the middle, in between where the top 8 is and where that top 20 cutoff is. So, yes, it's a terrible break for Ray Alfala, but also Matt Bussa. Here's a driver that made it into the playoffs and contended for a championship last year, and here he is potentially looking at a top 20 cutoff. So it's not very good either for him. So a couple of drivers had some really bad luck, and then you look at Keegan Leahy, who had a rollover and still made it into the top 5 at the end of this one.
Not to beat a dead horse, it's also a point that you hear on any given race weekend this season in 2019 with the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series is that, Randy, again, these are still brand new race cars. You know, on iRacing, of course, the cars change annually with the 4 major updates every quarter throughout the year to mimic that of the 2019, Cup car package. And there's adjustment periods that come every week regardless. But I think that it's been a big change in 2019, drivers getting things figured out.
Yeah, it really has been. The cars, of course, a little bit different and everyone getting things sorted. And, of course, this is the first time we've seen this package on the road course, as I think we now have that driver from Fresno, California, who put in such a dominant performance tonight. I think Evan stood by with Bobby Zelensky.
Obviously, didn't change things much for the perspective of the driver of the 18 machine. Bobby Zelensky, once more a winner from Sonoma Raceway in the eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series. We're trackside with him now. Bobby, congratulations on the win. I think most people thought coming into tonight that this would be your best opportunity to get that Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota into victory lane. 2 coming into tonight, and now 3 for 3 all time here. What makes you so good at this racetrack?
Yeah, I think it's honestly just because this is my most favorite track on the sim, and just in general, I just love this place. It's it's a California track. You can call it a home track. And I just love this place. Every time I come here, I have a different attitude than I come with anywhere else, where I'm just dead set on winning, and that is the goal. And coming into today, obviously it was the same goal, but after Charlotte battling for the lead and my internet dropping out, it was tough. That was probably the most disappointed I've been at in sim racing, and that could have definitely been a win. And so I knew I had to come in here 10 points behind the cut after a pretty rough season, and I had to deliver at my best track. And boy, oh boy, we delivered, and it's a huge relief. Man, I'm stoked. I don't sound stoked, but I'm pretty tired, so.
I feel like you got to be worn out 55 laps, and again, no caution flag breaks. You're up and on the wheel for the entirety of that hour and a half, the length of this race. But certainly, you come into tonight and you do your job. You get the win at the racetrack that, in theory, you're supposed to win at, and it gives you critical points. Wins don't lock you into the playoffs in this series, but you get a lot of critical points tonight. It was a different Sonoma tonight than what we had seen in the past. Of course, running the full circuit, and some of the race's more memorable moments came down on the inside there through the carousel. How did that affect you at all? Did if anything, it helped you get a little bit extra to a race-winning margin of 8.6 seconds, having that much more racetrack to play with? Or was that also maybe a little bit of a learning period for you, trying to race on a version of this circuit that maybe you weren't as familiar with as what we've run in years past?
I was honestly going into this thinking that it would help me, because when I first started going for pro and all that, that was the first time they ever used Sonoma in pro, and I was able to win that. And then, so I felt like I had a little bit of a kind of jump on the rest of the peak competition with learning Sonoma. And then, 2 years go by, everyone kind of knows the track, the top runners like Conti, Otger, others. So I was actually really happy to see a few more corners added, because that means it's somewhere for, a few corners for everybody to learn for the first time, so I really liked it. And I was struggling a little bit with the carousel and testing, but overall, it was just like any other corner. It threw me and probably everybody for a curveball was the cold weather we got in qualifying and race. The forecast was pretty much saying clear, and it was going to be hot conditions. And actually, I was looking forward to it, but we had cold, so I think everybody was a little messed up by it, but. Thankfully, it didn't affect us too much, and we were able to just start first, focus, and just drive. Lap cars were really nice, but I was glad to see this new version of Sonoma for sure, and it was interesting to have kind of a longer race than we usually have. It's the same distance, 55 laps, but we have 20 seconds more lap time, so really, it was a really difficult one.
Of course, the way that this one played out as well, looked like all of the cars up front decided to go with the two-stopper. In theory, you probably could have stretched for the one. The cars behind you actually pitted for that first pit stop at about 1/3 distance before you did. Did you decide to come in and go for the two-stopper with them just because you saw them go for the short pit and figured, hey, if I'm faster when we're on even terms, then, don't mess with a good thing, or was the plan for you to go for two stops all along?
Yeah, the plan was two stops. About 2.5 weeks ago, I did a full fuel stint, kind of did some math, figured out that two stops was, even if you could make it on one stop, save the fuel, the tires just got shredded here because we have so much more downforce. We're flying around the circuit, and so I knew pretty early on that two stop was the only option no matter what the weather was, and that's what we went with. But thankfully, on the first stops, my whole goal was to get a 5-second gap on Conti, because after the first few laps, so I could kind of cover an undercut. So that was my whole goal, and that's, it all worked out. I pitted on my points on my two-stop, and we were just able to drive.
And certainly, first trip to victory lane for you in this 2019 season. A couple of things have changed since we last chatted with you down here in Sonoma victory lane, one of which you get a $500 purse for coming away as the winner. And the points are on the left-hand side of our screen. This win puts you in to the playoff cut-up, currently scored in 7th position, 1 point ahead of Nick Ottinger, who's there in 8th, and 2 ahead of Jimmy Mullis, who is just on the outside looking in 9th. So a lot of work to do, but what does this win mean for you going forward as we head to Chicago in 2 weeks?
It's great. I've been wrecked at a lot of races this year and had a disconnect, like I said, so it's been rough. Usually by Sonoma in my first 2 seasons, I had almost a race gap to 9th, and everything was just consistent. I was able to, I got in some wrecks, but I was able to stay consistent. And this year, I feel like my cars have just been the best they've ever been. It's just been one of those years. So I'm hoping this is a turnaround, and we can go to Chicago and we can race for the win there, because we were racing for the win at Charlotte last race, and we know we have this. We just gotta figure something out. A lot of people blame luck on them getting wrecked, but sometimes it's just certain things you're doing wrong. So, for sure, it's gonna be tight. It's 5 races to the chase. We just need to get consistent top 10s, and I think we'll be all right.
You did your job tonight, and you put yourself back into a playoff funded position with the first win of 2019. Bobby, we'll let you get out of here. Before we do, anybody else you want to say hi to for making this possible?
Yeah, thanks to Joe Gibbs Racing, of course, representing this 18 car and representing such a great organization. We finally got them to victory lane where they deserve to be. Even rocking the 2000 Bobby Labonte championship scheme. So maybe that's a good omen. We can get a championship this year. So got to thank them. Interstate Batteries also on the car. Virtual Racing School, big supporter of mine, and I'm a big supporter of them. It's a great place to go learn and race pretty much any series on iRacing. And I am using a kind of test version of the VRS Direct Force Pro, and I think it helped me stay consistent this year. I think it's a pretty good product, a good wheel, and got to thank all my teammates, of course. It sucks to see what happened to Jake out there. He was putting in a solid run, and I got to thank everyone behind the scenes at Sport, like Chris and Keeg. I mean, they've done such amazing work on setups. Great trio to be a part of, and I got to thank also my spotter, Philip Stam. And we'll see y'all in Chicago. Hopefully, I can talk to you again after that race.
We appreciate you giving us some time again, Bobby. Congratulations on the win, and we will catch you in 2 weeks' time on the 25th. It's a 9 Eastern start back here on RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Sports Network. Best of luck then.
Thank you.
Is your race winner tonight in the Sonoma 55. Zelensky comes out on top, first time in 2019. And flip side of that, really the only other driver, Tim, that was remotely close. So over the course of the night, the number 8 of Michael Conti, who comes home with a P2. Your track side with him now.
Yeah, the Filter Time ride comes home in position number 2 here this evening, Michael Conti. But Mike, let's talk about it. In about 8 seconds, 9 seconds behind. What more did you need out of this 8 car to contend with Zelensky tonight?
I think we were a little bit too tight to start the race. The weather threw us for a loop. We were practicing in much hotter temperatures. And when it was mostly cloudy and really cold, we knew that we were going to have to make some adjustments. And did some track bar stuff in practice. Thought we loosened it up enough, but it wasn't, so had to make more adjustments on the pit stops during the race to get it closer to Bobby. I don't think we could have ever gotten to him, though. The hat's off to Bobby. I mean, honestly, he's, I think, the best racer out here at Sonoma. I've tried for years to beat him here, and I don't think I ever have. So, kudos to him. He did a really good job. His pace was phenomenal, and he never put a wheel off. So what more did we need? Car to be a little bit looser and the driver to be about a tenth or two better every lap. But good run for the Filter Time car. Solid race for us. Finally got some points that we needed, and worked out pretty well overall.
When it got bright, it got bright. We saw some of the onboards of how hard it might have been to try to straddle that line. How hard was it from the seat of the 8 car to try to keep it on the straight and narrow when it got bright out here and the sun started to shine?
Well, I guess I have to thank the Junior Motorsports guys for that one. They hooked me up with a brand new computer and 3 really nice monitors after Daytona. So with that said, I didn't really have too many problems seeing. By the end of the race, my red eyeball was like burning out of my head, so that wasn't very fun. But it was weird. Like, you would go around for a lap and it'd be completely dark, and then you'd come back around the next lap and it was sunny and cars starting to slide around. So it kept everybody on their toes. I don't think either condition really favored our car more than the other. I think we were pretty consistent with hot and cold. But I know, like Nick, he was in a tight battle with Keegan, and he said when he was right up behind him, he couldn't see a couple times. So I guess it was bad for guys back in traffic. But with me pretty much being by myself after the first stint there, it wasn't too bad.
You've got about 11 points on the cutoff now. We've got 5 races to go before we hit the playoffs. What is your forecast? What is your summary going into these next 5 races? You got Chicagoland, Kentucky, Pocono, Michigan, and Bristol. About 11 points ahead of the cutoff. What are you thinking mindset-wise going in to try to lock yourself into the playoffs?
Well, we need to build on what we've been doing with the intermediate stuff over the last couple races. When the package came out, we were a little bit off, but I feel like our team is like that every year. We always figure it out. But Charlotte, we were really good, running top 3 to 5 the whole race, and got caught up in an accident toward the end there. But I think our intermediate package is pretty good. We're going to Chicago next week, and that's pretty much going to use the same base as Charlotte. They're both bumpy and fast. So I think we just need to put a lot of work into it, which we do every week with the guys on the team here. And I think we'll be good. Qualifying is super important, even with how big of effect the draft has in these intermediate tracks. Track position still trumps all. So we're looking forward to it. Glad to finally have gotten Blake and Dale and everybody at Filter Time a really good finish for this 8 car. Going into the next few weeks, as far as partnerships are concerned, where everything's kind of up in the air. We're still looking to have some people sign on. So a good run here is awesome for that. And we just need to keep running well so we can attract new partners, get new eyeballs in this 8 car, and go into the playoffs strong.
You mentioned Filter Time. It's been a while since we talked at the Texas Motor Speedway. Let us know who's on this crew and who makes it happen to get this 8 car to the racetrack every week.
Yeah, of course. Again, big thanks to Blake and Dale for putting themselves out there a little bit and taking a leap of faith on this 8 car this year. Support for the car and Filter Time and everything that they stand for has been tremendous on Twitter. So thanks to them, thanks to the fans of the NASCAR PEAK Antifreeze series for supporting this deal. I hope that what we've done with Filter Time proves that it can be done for other companies that are interested. So definitely, get it while the iron is hot, if you will. But as far as my guys go, Nick, Logan, Brian, Matt Busa, Brandon Hastings, as always. Thank you to them for sticking around me and behind me. A lot of hard work went into Sonoma, a lot of late nights, and a lot of sit-ups were shared back and forth, and I think we finally landed on something pretty good. So these guys will get it figured out for Chicago. We'll hopefully qualify up front, keep it clean, and build some more points in that playoff cushion.
There's Michael Conti, second on the racetrack this evening, going to move up to fifth in the point standings with a handful of races to go prior to that playoff cutoff. I believe Randy has caught up with our third place finisher, the 47 of Nick Ottinger.
Yep, I'm stood by with Nick. And Nick, highlight or maybe low light of your race was that incident with Keegan following the second round of pit stops as you guys were basically out there on your outlap. You finished third, so you get the benefit of saying what you think first. What was your sort of mindset on that incident?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank our team for bringing a really good car. I mean, we battled with Keegan there for sure up until that point. Got to thank Mike Connie and them for just their outright just dedication to get us good pace with that incident. And I was actually just talking to Keegan about it. Like, on my screen, I couldn't see he actually, when I actually got into him, I think the corner, right before we got to the corner entry, I couldn't tell he was going to curb hop the exit of it. So I kind of like went right under his car and just lifted him over. But somehow he still finished fourth. But after that, I had to save my engine. And, I mean, I hate we put on like that type of brawl, but I mean, it's just, it happened. I mean, I can't really say nothing else. Just really hard battling. He knew if I got by him, he was pretty much just going to ride for fourth, and I knew if I got by him, I could at least get a shot to get the Mikey in. But I mean, it just didn't work out that way. I mean, our Kroger team definitely put a good car under us tonight, so I mean, can't really get too complacent out here in these road courses, so.
In 2 weeks, we go back oval racing at Chicagoland, and the most notable thing of that race, new feature coming in the new build on iRacing, we have green-white checkered in effect for Chicagoland for the first time in eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series competition. How do you think that might affect things going into that race at Chicagoland?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Like, it depends, obviously, how the race is going to go, whether it's going to go green the whole way or whatever, but I mean, Chicagoland kind of brings good long runs at mid portions of the race, but this package, you really, I don't even know what to guess, really. I mean, you're going to be all over each other for first 5 laps, but this new feature, I mean, I'm glad it's in there. It just adds another aspect to where, you know, we got our smart crew chiefs like Matt Holden on my box. You can just come out with a magic wand and just put us on a race strategy. I mean, he's really smart with it, so, I mean, got the best in the series on my box, so, I mean, I think we'll be good with it.
Well, thanks for joining us, Nick. You got the thanks for the sponsors and interviews out of the way at Ed, so thank you for joining us, and congratulations on an amazing run here tonight at Sonoma, and good luck to you next time out at Chicagoland.
Appreciate it.
Keegan Leahy ends up fourth today, and he stood by with Tim Terry.
Well, Keegan Leahy comes home in position number 4 and had to drive it at the end of the race. Let's talk about the little roller coaster ride that you went through after hopping the curb and the contact with Nick. What was... talk us through what happened there.
Geez, I guess what happened is I was really gripped up on those new tires, and it's also basically overcast conditions, so it was just way more grip than anybody expected for that race, and just going over that curb, over the hill, got up on 2 wheels, and before she set back down, Nick already had a huge run on me, and I guess he didn't notice I was 2-wheel and didn't let out of the gas. He was trying to get a run on me there for turn 5, and he got into me and sent me over. So I guess I pulled a Dale Earnhardt moment there with rolling the car and getting back out there, and somehow came home in pretty much the spot where I deserved.
Were you surprised with the pace it was able to keep after it came back down on its wheels?
Yeah, it was barely 2/10 off, I think. Like, I didn't really get much engine damage. The temperature started getting hot on the dash, so you could tell the engine was a little bit damaged, or at least the radiator, and I just kind of took it a little easy, prayed for it not to blow up, because that can definitely happen if you get engine damage. Like, it just can randomly blow up, and even when it's not getting too hot. So I was being really careful there, and kept decent pace, kept the gap to Logan Clampett, and yeah, brought it home somehow.
So you bring it home in position number 4, and maybe more importantly, point standing wise, You're only 5 points out of the point lead now after Ryan Luza had his bad luck tonight. So obviously the big thing is to try to make it into the playoffs. But are you thinking possibly maybe a regular season championship now with 5 races to go? Is that in the back of your mind going into these next 5?
Hey, I'd take it, but yeah, you're right. It's the main focus is on top 8 in points right now. Maybe get a couple wins before the season's out to try to get some bonus points for when the playoffs start. But right now, yeah, I'm just focusing on top 8. I got a huge cushion now, I think, and I just gotta get a few decent races home, have some clean races. I don't want to rack up any incident points or anything, so I'm just gonna be careful and turn it up when the playoffs start, basically.
So a little bit of a gap and a little bit of a comfortable gap heading into Chicagoland in a couple weeks' time. What do we expect out of that racetrack? And can we see the 62 car in victory lane in Chicagoland?
Hey, I was in the victory lane the last mile and a half, so I think I can try for it. Safest place to be is up front, right? So yeah, I'll definitely be going for it. I think we'll be strong, and everyone else is going to be pretty strong too. Everyone's working hard every week, and it's the same group of guys up front every week, it seems. So, I'll have the same challenges as last week or last race and the race before that.
Marketing partners, teammates, who helps you get to the racetrack each week?
Yeah, check out that Virtual Racing School logo on the hood. We're just putting the finishing touches, I think, on the VRS wheel. So I think there's going to be some announcements coming up soon. Hopefully, we'll get that out to the public soon. And thanks so much to G2 Esports for drafting me and all the support. They're such a big help, and I'm excited to participate in some events coming up too. I think I might be able to attend some G2 events later in the summer, or maybe early in the fall. So I'm excited to meet those guys, and thanks so much to Bobby Zelensky. Oh my God, he helped so much this week. He's such a good guy to work off of. Had me pretty clear this race, but definitely a good guy to have a benchmark for. Chris Shearburn for all the help too, and yeah, everyone else that helps me. Mitchell DeYoung up on the spotter stand, of course, and everyone else at Coinda.
There's Keegan Leahy, another top 5 finish here, coming home in position number 4 and getting close to the top of the point standings as well, running second, only 5 points behind heading in to Chicagoland Speedway. I believe Randy has caught up with the leader of Clamp Nation, Logan Clampett, coming home with the top 5 run tonight.
Yeah, Logan managing to get that 99 car up into the top 5. And Logan, talk me through your race. You qualified ninth today, and we really didn't talk about that car much. There was a lot of craziness happening up and down the field. Talk me through your race. How'd you manage to pick up 4 spots to snag yourself a top 5?
Well, there's a lap 1 incident, which thankfully I got through somewhat safely. Brad checked up there to avoid Garrett, and I accidentally got into the back of him. I didn't have the reaction time. So I got a little bit of front end damage there. I had to short shift and not use as much throttle the first run, but thankfully was keeping pace because my temps were getting up to like 275. So we had to manage it a little bit there towards the beginning, but we brought the tape down those last 2 runs, well, the next run on pit stops, and I could go a lot harder, and just kind of ran my race and routed home 5th. But I did hear that Keegan flipped over or something, and I wanted to try and catch him, but just didn't have enough time, and the car kind of died off there towards the end. Well, driver did, because I burned up my tires trying to catch him, but overall just a solid race and a solid finish.
And talking about the sort of dealing with the temps there is, something that not a lot of sims really have, and really think, one of the great things we have in the iRacing service, especially with you guys having the tape. How much of the tape here, especially on the road courses, really change up how the car handles? I know that, of course, on the ovals, there's a huge amount of pressure on that front spoiler, the front splitter, as you kind of push the air through. But how much of an effect does that have on the road courses where the cornering speeds are so much slower that you might typically see at one of our big 1.5 mile or 2 mile racetracks?
Well, it's definitely looser. It makes the car looser for sure, but like using 100 tape for qualifying, testing qualifying and stuff, it was just a lot looser, but there was more turn and everything and this and that, but more downforce and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's a big difference on road courses, I guess. I was using around 30-ish tape, so the whole race. So the car handled pretty decent. If I went up to like 40 or something, I don't think it would have made that big of a difference. Just I guess like going from like 30 to 100 makes a big difference.
Well, thanks for joining us, Logan. Congratulations on a strong top 5 run, and like you said, getting your way through that early incident we saw at the start of the race. Before we let you go, who gets it done for the number 99 Burton Kligerman eSports car?
Well, first and foremost, thanks to the Team Conti guys for building just a phenomenal car for the race tonight. Mainly Ottinger and Conti turned so many laps to get the car perfect. So big thank you to them. Thanks to Jason Loafing for helping out on the box, spotting there, keeping up with times and such. Burton Kligerman Esports and JD Laird for the beautiful paint scheme, and thank you iRacing and PEAK and NASCAR for putting all this on, and thank you guys for broadcasting.
Evan, back over to you.
Well, as always, we want to say a big thanks to the top 5 drivers for giving us their time post-race tonight. That's Bobby Zalenski, Michael Conti, Nick Ottinger, Keegan Leahy, and Logan Clampett, who come through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is a look at, again, your top 10 race results tonight from the Sonoma Raceway. And if we can take a look at what the points standings have been adjusted to out of this race now with 9 down on the season, a very rough go at it for Ryan Luza this evening. Basically evaporates, Randy, what was that entire race of an advantage he had. It's now only 5 points ahead of Keegan Leahy. But again, big picture, Nick Ottinger, that's the cut line, 243. We see this win launch Bobby Zalenski up and into the top 8. He sits 7th. It is a 1-point split between in and out, with 9 races now complete this season, leaving us with just 5 more until we can race later into the season and, of course, get down to playoffs.
And you talk about what happened with Ryan Luza, and you're right. He put in so much work in the early goings of the championship to have his lead, and really the past 3 races, he's sort of just ended up in situations where that's all gotten thrown away, and it's just 5 points now between Ryan and Keegan. And like you said, they're at the cutoff line in the top 8. 1 point difference between in and out, and 1 point difference from being not on the bubble for Bobby Zalenski. So things have really gotten tight here in these last handful of races, and it's great to see some things tightening up, as we only have a handful more races before we get ready to go playoff racing.
Couple of intermediates in there as well. Chicago, Kentucky, Pocono, Michigan, and Bristol to come before the regular season comes to a close. You can see there the look at the upcoming races. It all continues June the 25th from Chicagoland Speedway, and to a point that Randy had made chatting with some of our drivers there post-race, Tim. No longer is it the point of no return. One of the things that has changed in this most recent iRacing to build is green-white checkers. Now, a 1.5-mile racetrack is far from a guarantee that we may see the first ever green-white checker in the eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing series, but it is something to keep in mind as we get set for round 10.
And the one thing that Keegan Leahy kind of mentioned as well, he mentioned he was fast at Charlotte, 1.5 miles coming up at Chicagoland. He has a little bit of confidence that he's going to be good there, but he also mentioned those drivers that are typically running up front are likely going to be running up front there as well. You look at Bristol as the potential real wild card that's left. Sonoma was, I think, one of those wild cards. We kind of knew who was going to be up front, guys like Zalenski and Conti. Yes, some of those drivers like Gerald T and had a rough run here tonight, but you knew who was going to be up front or who was going to be the player in this one. You look at some of those 1.5 miles, your Chicagoland, your Kentucky. I mean, Michigan's wide open spaces per se, 2-mile oval. Pocono, it has its own characteristics as well, and then you run to Bristol. So there's some things to be decided, and you look at that top 20 cutoff. Ray Alfala has fallen back to 24th in the point standings. He's only 7 points back from the cutoff, which is currently tied with Jarl Tien and Dylan Duvall. So there's still a little bit to be decided there. Malik Ray wasn't here this evening. He falls outside the cut line. Brian Schoenberg fell 3 spots in the standings with his rough luck tonight. Matt Boos has fallen as well, so back to 17. So there's there's a lot to be decided, not only in that top 8, but also in that cutoff as well. You see some drivers that really had good runs here tonight inside that top 10, and they definitely needed it to move themselves up. But we move back to a mile and a half next week or 2 weeks' time. Can't wait to see that unfold.
It took until week number 9 for us to see a finish this season where first and second place were separated by less than, or I guess I should say by more than a second. Every race this year had been less than a second. The margin tonight, the margin of victory, 8.6 seconds. A dominating win for Bobby Zalenski as round number 9 falls into our rearview mirror. As we step aside, I want to thank all of the people who make these broadcasts possible. For our director, Hugo Luis, for Alex Horn providing the cameras for us, the broadcast graphics package by Andy Warner and Simon Grossman. For your broadcast team tonight, for Tim Terry and Randy Cheneth, I'm Evan Pasoko. Thanks for tuning in. We encourage you to go to eNASCAR.com to stay up to date as we get set to return in 2 weeks' time. That's on June the 25th from the Chicagoland Speedway. It's a 9 Eastern start once more here, Race Spot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. In fact, that race and every race of this 2019 eNASCAR PEAK Antifreeze iRacing Series going to be found right here on the iRacing Esports Network. Until next time, good night from Sonoma, where Bobby Zalenski's your race winner.